My 15-year-old disabled grandson was sleeping in a garage that was 40 degrees Fahrenheit. My daughter-in-law Brittany had given her two healthy children their own bedrooms and turned the fourth bedroom into a dedicated craft room for her scrapbooking hobby. When I arrived at 10 o'clock at night and found him shivering next to a lawnmower, he looked up at me with terror in his eyes and asked, "Am I bad, Grandpa?" Within 1 week, I made sure her entire life fell apart. I am Winston Carter, 73 years old, and I spent 40 years of my life crawling through ventilation ducts and installing furnaces in Detroit winters. I know what cold feels like. I know how it settles into your bones and makes your joints ache. But the cold I felt that night in Atlanta had nothing to do with the weather. It was the coldness of a woman's heart and the silence of my own son who let it happen. Before I tell you how I evicted them from the paradise I paid for, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to be the shield for someone who could not defend themselves. The drive from Detroit to Atlanta is roughly 11 hours if you drive like a sensible retired man, but I made it in 9. I didn't stop for food. I didn't stop to stretch my legs. I only stopped for gas and coffee, black and strong enough to strip paint. I was driving my 10-year-old Ford pickup truck. It has rust on the wheel wells and a dent in the bumper, but the engine purrs like a kitten. People look at my truck and they see an old black man who probably scrapes by on Social Security. They don't see the owner of a commercial HVAC company that I sold for 7 figures 5 years ago. I like it that way. I have always believed that money talks, but wealth whispers. I hadn't told my son Damon that I was coming. That was intentional. For the last 3 months, every time I asked to FaceTime with Leo, there was an excuse. Leo was sleeping, Leo was at therapy, Leo was having a bad day and didn't want to be on camera. My gut told me something was wrong. My gut has kept me alive through race riots, recessions, and a stroke. I learned a long time ago that when your gut speaks, you listen. I pulled into the driveway of the colonial-style brick house at 10:15 at night. The neighborhood was silent. It was a wealthy suburb, the kind of place where the lawns are manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the homeowners association sends you a fine if your mailbox is the wrong shade of beige. I looked up at the house. It was dark except for the amber glow of the porch lights. I bought this house for them 5 years ago. I put the down payment down. I paid for the renovations. I wanted Leo to have a good home, especially after his mother, my daughter Sarah, died in that car accident. That accident took my daughter, and it took the use of Leo's legs. He was 10 then. He is 15 now. I sat in my truck for a moment watching the house. It looked peaceful. It looked like the American dream. But I felt a tightness in my chest. I walked up to the front door. I raised my hand to knock, but then I stopped. It was late. If I knocked now, I would wake up the whole house. Brittany would come down in her silk robe, acting surprised and annoyed. She would put on that fake smile of hers, the one that never reaches her eyes, and she would block me from seeing Leo until morning. She would say he needs his rest. She would manage the situation. I didn't want to be managed. I wanted to see my grandson. I remembered that Damon had given me the keypad code to the garage door years ago when I helped them move in. He probably thought I had forgotten it. I haven't forgotten a number since 1968. I walked around the side of the house. The wind was biting. The weather report said it was an unseasonably cold night for Georgia, dropping down to near freezing. I pulled my coat tighter. I punched the code into the keypad. 1975, the year Sarah was born. The mechanism groaned and the heavy door rolled up slowly. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of a home. It was the smell of gasoline oil and damp concrete. It was the smell of a workspace. The garage was dark, illuminated only by the street lamp behind me, casting a long shadow across the floor. I reached for the light switch on the wall, but before I could flip it, I heard a sound. It was a cough. A wet, rattling cough that sounded like it was coming from the floor. I froze. "Who is there?" I called out, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. There was a rustling sound, like a small animal moving in dry leaves. I flipped the switch. The fluorescent tube lights flickered and buzzed to life, washing the garage in a harsh, clinical white glare. My breath caught in my throat. There in the corner, wedged between a riding lawnmower and a stack of plastic storage bins, was a mattress. It wasn't a bed. It was a thin, stained foam mattress thrown directly onto the concrete floor. And on that mattress, curled up in a fetal position, was my grandson, Leo. He was buried under 3 thin blankets that looked like the kind you use for moving furniture. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt and sweatpants, but I could see him shivering. The air in the garage was freezing. I am an HVAC man. I know temperature. It was maybe 45 degrees in there. No insulation, no heat source. Just raw concrete sucking the warmth out of his paralyzed legs. "Leo," I whispered. The boy on the mattress flinched. He pulled the blanket up over his head, trying to hide. "Please don't be mad," he whimpered. "I didn't make a noise. I promise I didn't make a noise." My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I walked over to him. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through wet cement. I knelt down on the cold, hard floor beside the mattress. "Leo," I said softly. "It is me. It is Grandpa." Slowly the blanket came down. I stared at his face. He looked thin. Too thin. His eyes were sunken, and there were dark circles under them that looked like bruises. His lips were chapped and pale. "Grandpa," he rasped. He looked at me with confusion, and then panic seized him. He tried to sit up, but his legs wouldn't cooperate, and he didn't have his wheelchair. I looked around. The wheelchair was nowhere near him. It was folded up and leaned against the far wall 10 feet away. They had taken his mobility. They had trapped him on the floor. "Grandpa, you have to go," Leo whispered, his eyes darting toward the door that led into the house. "Brittany will be so mad. She said no visitors. She said I am in time out." "Time out?" I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt since I was a young man fighting in the streets. "Leo, you are 15 years old. Why are you sleeping in the garage?" Leo looked down at his hands. His fingers were red from the cold. "I had an accident," he said softly. "I spilled my juice on the rug. The new rug in the living room." Brittany screamed. She said I am dirty. She said I ruin everything nice she buys. She said animals sleep outside until they learn how to behave. I felt the blood roaring in my ears. I felt a heat rising in my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. Animals. She called my daughter's son an animal. I looked around the garage. I saw the oil stains on the floor inches from his pillow. I saw the spider webs in the corner. I saw a bag of fertilizer sitting next to his head. "How long, Leo?" I asked. "How long have you been out here?" "I don't know," he said. "Maybe a week." "Since the carpet accident. Dad said it was just for a night to teach me a lesson, but then Brittany turned my room into the craft room. She moved her sewing machines in, sewing. She said the light was better there. She said I didn't need a big room because I don't walk around." He looked up at me and asked the question that will haunt me until the day I die. "Am I bad, Grandpa? Is that why nobody wants me inside?" I reached out and pulled him into my arms. He was cold, ice cold. He felt fragile like a bird with broken wings. I held him tight, trying to transfer every ounce of heat in my body into his. "No, Leo," I choked out, fighting back the tears that were burning my eyes. "You are not bad. You are the best thing in this world. They are the bad ones. They are the monsters." I wanted to kick down the door. I wanted to storm into that house, climb the stairs, and drag my son and his wife out of their warm, king-sized bed by their hair. I wanted to throw them onto this concrete floor and let them feel what it is like to freeze while your family sleeps in luxury. But I stopped myself. If I went in there now, I would go to jail. I would kill them. I knew it with absolute certainty. If I saw Brittany's face right now, I would not be able to stop my hands from doing what a grandfather's instinct was screaming to do. And if I went to jail, Leo would be left in the system. Or worse, he would be left with them. I needed a plan. I needed to be cold. Colder than this garage. I pulled back from Leo. "Listen to me, Leo," I said, gripping his shoulders. "I am going to get you out of here, but not tonight. If I take you now, they will call the police and say I kidnapped you. They have legal custody." Leo's face fell. "You are leaving me." "No," I said firmly. "Never. I am going to stay right here in my truck. I am going to watch over you like a hawk. But first, I need to do something." I pulled out my phone. I stood up and stepped back. I took a picture of Leo on the mattress. I took a picture of the lawnmower next to his head. I took a picture of the wheelchair placed out of his reach. I took a picture of the thermometer on the wall reading 40 degrees. I documented the horror. "Okay, Leo," I said, putting the phone away. "I need you to be brave for one more night. Can you do that for Grandpa?" Leo nodded, shivering. "I can do it." I took off my heavy wool coat. It was a Carhartt lined and thick. I wrapped it around him, tucking it in tight. Tomorrow morning, everything changes, I promised him. Tomorrow morning, the world is going to crash down on their heads. I walked backward toward the garage door, not wanting to take my eyes off him. Sleep now, son, I whispered. I lowered the garage door, watching him disappear back into the darkness. I walked back to my truck. I didn't start the engine. I sat there in the dark, clutching the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I stared at the upstairs window, the one where the soft light of a television was flickering. That was the master bedroom. That was where my son Damon was sleeping. My son, who I had raised to be a man. My son who was letting his own flesh and blood freeze next to a bag of fertilizer because his wife wanted a craft room. I looked at the photo on my phone. You want to treat him like an animal, Brittany, I thought. Fine. Tomorrow I am going to call the exterminator, and I am going to show you that the only vermin in this house is you. I reclined my seat and waited for the sun to rise. It was going to be a very long night, but the morning was going to be biblical. I sat in my truck for exactly 5 minutes after leaving the garage. I needed those 5 minutes to lower my heart rate from stroke level to just plain homicide level. I watched the digital clock on my dashboard tick over from 11:59 to midnight. A new day. A new war. I stepped out of the truck. The wind cut through my flannel shirt, but I didn't feel it. I marched up the concrete walkway that I had paid to have repaved last summer because Brittany complained that the old one was uneven for her heels. I reached the front door. It was solid mahogany with a decorative glass inlay. Expensive. Heavy. I didn't look for the doorbell. A doorbell is for guests. A doorbell is for neighbors bringing cookies. I wasn't a guest, and I sure as hell wasn't bringing cookies. I raised my fist. It is a fist that has hammered sheet metal and turned rusted pipe wrenches for half a century. I hammered on the wood. Bang, bang, bang. The sound echoed through the quiet suburban street like gunshots. I didn't stop. I hit it again and again. I wanted the neighbors to wake up. I wanted the dogs to bark. I wanted the illusion of this perfect, happy home to crack right down the middle. Inside, I saw the lights flicker on. I heard footsteps, heavy, confused footsteps. The deadbolt slid back. The door creaked open. Damon stood there. My son. He was wearing plaid flannel pajama bottoms and a matching t-shirt. He rubbed his eyes, blinking against the porch light. He looked soft. That was the only word for it. He looked like a man who had never been cold in his life. Dad, he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? It is midnight. I didn't answer. I didn't wait for an invitation. I put my hand on his chest and I pushed. I walked right through him, forcing him to stumble back into the foyer to keep his balance. I stepped inside and slammed the door behind me. The heat hit me instantly. As an HVAC man, I can tell the temperature of a room within 2 degrees just by standing in it. It was 74 degrees in that house. Toasty, dry, expensive. I could hear the furnace humming in the basement. It was a high-efficiency unit I had installed myself 3 years ago. It was working perfectly, pumping dollar bills worth of natural gas into every corner of this house to keep my son and his wife comfortable while my grandson lay on concrete 40 feet away. Damon stared at me wide-eyed. Dad, what is going on? You look crazy. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the house. Vanilla bean and lavender. It smelled like a spa. Where is your wife, Damon? I asked, my voice low and vibrating with the rumble of a boiler about to blow. Damon looked toward the stairs. She is sleeping, Dad. Why didn't you call? We didn't know you were coming. The guest room isn't ready. I laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. The guest room, I repeated. That is funny, Damon, because I just came from the garage. And it looks like the guest room is occupied by a lawnmower and your son. Damon's face went pale. The blood drained out of him so fast I thought he might faint. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, just a pathetic stammering noise. Before he could construct a lie, I heard the rustle of fabric on the stairs. Brittany was coming down. She moved like she was descending from a throne. She was wearing a silk robe, a shimmering champagne color that probably cost more than my first truck. Her hair was wrapped in a silk scarf. She didn't look sleepy. She looked annoyed. She looked like a queen whose court jester had interrupted her beauty rest. Winston, she said, her voice dripping with that fake southern sweetness that always made my teeth ache. Do you have any idea what time it is? You scared us half to death pounding on the door like the police. She reached the bottom of the stairs and walked over to Damon, placing a manicured hand on his arm. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and condescension. Bidding for time, she was assessing my mood, trying to figure out how much I knew. I looked at her. I looked at the silk robe. I looked at the fuzzy slippers on her feet. "I know exactly what time it is, Brittany," I said. "It is 40 degrees outside. It is 74 degrees inside. And it is time you told me why Leo is sleeping next to a bag of fertilizer." Brittany didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She didn't look guilty. She just let out a long, suffering sigh, the kind you give a toddler who asks a stupid question. "Oh, Winston," she said, shaking her head. "You always have to be so dramatic, don't you?" She walked past me into the kitchen and started filling a glass of water from the fridge dispenser. "Leo is fine," she said over her shoulder. "He is having one of his episodes." "Episodes?" I asked, stepping into the kitchen. "Yes, episodes," she said, turning around and leaning against the granite counter. "You know how he gets. He has sensory processing issues. The doctors explained it to us. Sometimes the house is too loud for him. Sometimes the heat bothers him. He gets overstimulated." She took a sip of water, watching me over the rim of the glass. "He asked to sleep out there, Winston," she said calmly. "He begged us. He said he needed the cold air to calm his nervous system. We didn't want to let him, but Dr. Evans said we should respect his bodily autonomy. We gave him extra blankets. He is camping. Ideally, boys love camping." I stared at her. It was a masterpiece of a lie. It used medical jargon. It used the authority of a doctor. It turned their cruelty into an act of progressive parenting. If I hadn't seen the terror in Leo's eyes, I might have believed it. Bodily autonomy, I repeated. So he chose to sleep on the floor without his wheelchair. He chose to be trapped. He is not trapped, Brittany snapped, her voice sharpening. He is grounding himself. Honestly, Winston, you don't understand special needs children. You are from a different generation. You think everything is abuse. We are following a therapeutic plan. I looked at Damon. He was standing in the doorway looking at his feet. "Is that right, Damon?" I asked. "Is that the plan?" To freeze the therapy into him. Damon didn't answer. I turned back to Brittany. "Okay," I said. "If he likes the garage so much, then his bedroom must be empty. Let's go see it." Brittany froze. The glass of water paused halfway to her mouth. "What?" she asked. "I want to see his room," I said. "The room I pay for. The room on the first floor that we modified for his wheelchair access. The one with the roll-in shower." Brittany set the glass down. It made a sharp clink on the granite. "You can't go in there," she said quickly. "Why not?" I asked, taking a step toward her. "Is he in there? I thought he was camping." "He is not in there," she said, her eyes darting to the hallway. "But it is messy. We are painting. It is not fit for guests." "I am not a guest," I roared. "I am the man who pays the mortgage." I pushed past her. I knew the layout of this house better than she did. I had reviewed the blueprints when they bought it. The first floor master suite was supposed to be Leo's. It was the only room large enough for his equipment and accessible without an elevator. I marched down the hallway. "Winston, stop!" Brittany screamed, running after me. "You are invading our privacy. You can't just barge in here." "Dad!" "Wait!" Damon yelled, chasing her. I reached the double doors at the end of the hall. They were closed. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the handles and threw them open. I expected to see a mess. I expected to see paint cans. I expected to see maybe a storage room. I did not expect to see Martha Stewart's paradise. The room was brightly lit by recessed lighting that had been left on. The walls were painted a soft robin's egg blue. The floor, where the specially designed non-slip tiles used to be, was covered in a plush white carpet that would be impossible to roll a wheelchair over. And the stuff. My God, the stuff. There was no bed, there was no Hoyer lift, there was no medical equipment. Instead, the walls were lined with custom white cabinetry. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with color-coded plastic bins. Ribbons. Hundreds of spools of ribbons in every shade of the rainbow. Fabric. Bolts of expensive silk velvet and organic cotton stacked like logs. In the center of the room sat a massive island table made of butcher block wood. On top of it sat 3 machines. I recognized them because I had seen the charges on the credit card statements I occasionally glimpsed. A Cricut maker, a laser cutter, and a professional-grade embroidery machine that I knew cost at least $4,000. This wasn't a bedroom, it was a factory. I walked into the room. My boots sank into the plush carpet. I felt like I was walking on a crime scene. I picked up a spool of ribbon. It was gold imported from France. The price tag was still on it. $25. I turned around. Brittany and Damon were standing in the doorway. Brittany was breathing hard, her face flushed not with shame but with anger. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the ribbon. "It is my craft room," Brittany spat, crossing her arms. "I have a business, Winston. I am an influencer. I make content. I need a space to create. This is my office." "Your office," I said, looking around. "This was Leo's room. Where is his bed? Where is his shower?" "We moved him upstairs," Brittany said, defensive. "He didn't like this room. It was too big. He felt exposed. He likes the cozy room upstairs." "Upstairs?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "But there is no elevator, Brittany. How does he get upstairs?" "Damon carries him," she said, pointing at my son. "Damon is strong. It is a bonding experience for them." I looked at Damon. He looked away. I knew Damon had a bad back. I knew he complained if he had to lift a grocery bag. The idea of him carrying a 100-pound teenager up and down a flight of stairs 5 times a day was a lie so transparent it was insulting. "So he is trapped upstairs," I said, "unless you decide to carry him down, or unless you decide to throw him in the garage." I walked over to the embroidery machine. I ran my hand over the smooth plastic. $5,000 a month, I said softly. "What?" Brittany asked. "I send you $5,000 a month," I said, turning to face them. "On the first of every month like clockwork. I write in the memo line, for Leo's care." I took a step toward them. "That is $60,000 a year, plus the mortgage I paid off, plus the trust fund for his education." I held up the gold ribbon again. "Is this Leo's care, Brittany? Is this French ribbon helping him walk? Is this laser cutter helping him with his physical therapy?" Brittany stepped forward, her chin raised high. "I sacrifice everything for this family," she hissed. "You have no idea how hard it is to raise a special needs child. I deserve a space for myself. I deserve to have a hobby. That money is for the household Winston, and I am the manager of this household. If I need a craft room to keep my sanity so I can take care of your grandson, then that is a medical expense in my book. A medical expense." She looked at the room filled with toys for a grown woman and called it a medical expense while the patient slept on concrete. I dropped the ribbon. It unspooled on the floor, a trail of gold on the white carpet. I looked at Damon. "You let her do this," I said. "You let her take his room. You let her take his money. And tonight you let her take his dignity." Damon whispered, "Dad, please. It is complicated. You don't live here." "No, I don't," I said. "But I am here now." I walked past them. I shoved Damon aside again. I walked back down the hallway toward the front door. "Where are you going?" Brittany called out, her voice rising in panic. "If you leave now, don't bother coming back. We don't need your judgment." I stopped at the door. I turned around. I pulled out my phone. I held it up. "I am not leaving Brittany," I said. "I am just going to my truck. I have some calls to make, calls to who she sneered, to the bank," I said, "and to the devil, because you just invited him in." I opened the door and walked out into the cold. The heat of the house rushed out behind me, but it couldn't warm the chill in my soul. I had seen the room. I had seen the evidence. The war had begun. And unlike her ribbons, I wasn't going to be delicate. Chào người anh em dung chuyện đàn ông đây, tôi đã nhận lệnh. Phần 3 này là một bước chuyển tâm lý cực kỳ quan trọng. Winston phải chuyển từ một ngọn núi lửa phun trào sang một tảng băng trôi nguy hiểm. Sự kìm nén của ông ấy chính là thô tạo nên sức nặng cho câu chuyện. Dưới đây là nội dung chi tiết. Phần 3 viết bằng tiếng Anh chuẩn giọng đọc, không tiêu đề, không ký tù la, tập trung hoàn toàn vào diễn biến nội tâm và hành động. The cold night air hit my face like a slap, but it did nothing to cool the fire raging in my chest. I stood by the door of my rusted Ford pickup truck, my hand trembling as I reached for the door handle. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to go back inside. My gut told me to kick down that door, grab my grandson, wrap him in the blankets from my truck bed, and drive until we hit the state line. I wanted to take him to my house in Atlanta where there were warm beds and hot food, and nobody looked at him like he was a broken appliance. But before I could open the truck door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Finch. Atticus Finch. Not the lawyer from the book, but my oldest friend and the sharpest legal mind in Detroit. I had texted him a picture of Leo sleeping on the garage floor the moment I stepped outside. I answered the phone. "I am taking him, Atticus," I growled into the receiver. I am going back in there and I am taking the boy. Do not do that. Winston Finch's voice was sharp, cutting through my rage like a scalpel. Listen to me very carefully, old friend. If you put that boy in your truck tonight, you are not a hero. You are a kidnapper. What are you talking about? I shouted, pacing on the driveway. They are abusing him, Atticus. He is sleeping next to a lawnmower in 40-degree weather. I know, Finch said, his voice softening just a fraction. I saw the photo. It breaks my heart, Winston, it really does. But the law is a cold machine. Right now, Damon and that woman have full legal guardianship. If you take him without a court order, they will call the police. They will press charges for kidnapping and custodial interference. And with your history of, let's call it assertive conflict resolution, the judge will look at you as an unstable old man who snatched a disabled child in the middle of the night. So I just leave him there, I asked, my voice cracking. I leave him to freeze. You leave him there for now, Finch said firmly. Because if you get arrested tonight, you lose standing. You will never get custody. Brittany will paint you as a danger to the child and she will win. We need more than a photo of a mattress, Winston. We need proof of systemic abuse. We need proof of financial fraud. We need proof that she is unfit. I looked back at the house. The silhouette of Brittany moved across the upstairs window. She is unfit, I spat. She is a monster. Then prove it, Finch said. Go back in there. Swallow your pride. Apologize. Make them think you are just a tired, confused old man who overreacted. Buy yourself access. If you leave angry, they will cut you off. If you stay calm, you can get close enough to find the smoking gun. I hung up the phone. I stood there in the dark for a long time. The wind whistled through the oak trees. I looked at my hands. They were big hands, scarred from years of working with sheet metal and copper pipes. They were hands that fixed things. But tonight I couldn't fix this with force. I had to fix it with a lie. I wiped my face with my handkerchief. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold air one last time. Then I turned around and walked back to the house. Every step was a battle. My pride fought me every inch of the way. But I thought of Leo shivering under those thin blankets, and I forced myself to keep moving. I opened the front door. Damon and Brittany were still in the hallway. They looked up, startled. They had expected the sound of my truck engine fading into the distance. Instead, they saw me standing there, hat in hand, head bowed. I cleared my throat. I am sorry, I said. The words tasted like bile. Brittany raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms over her silk robe. Excuse me, she asked. I said, I am sorry, I repeated, forcing my voice to sound weary and defeated. I drove 8 hours straight. I am tired. I am an old man, and sometimes I get confused. I see things and I react without thinking. I looked at Damon. Son, I didn't mean to shove you. Seeing him out there, it shocked me. Damon let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging with relief. It is okay, Dad, he said quickly, eager to smooth things over. We know you worry. We know you love Leo. Brittany wasn't so easily convinced. She scrutinized me, her eyes narrowing like a cat watching a mouse. You were very rude, Winston, she said coldly. You insulted my home. You insulted my parenting. I know, I said, looking down at my boots. I am old-fashioned Brittany. We didn't have sensory processing therapy in my day. We just had discipline. Maybe I don't understand these modern methods. I looked up at her, giving her the look she wanted. The look of a man who knows he has been beaten. You are the mother, I said. You know what is best for the boy. If the doctor says he needs to sleep in the cold to calm down, then, well, who am I to argue with a doctor? A smile crept onto Brittany's face. It was a smug, triumphant smile. She had won. The grumpy old patriarch had bent the knee. Exactly, she said, uncrossing her arms. I am glad you finally realized that, Winston. We are doing everything we can for Leo. It is not easy, but we don't need judgment, we need support. You are right, I lied. You are absolutely right. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I didn't open it, but the gesture was enough. Brittany's eyes flickered to the leather. I just wanted to drop off a check, I said, and maybe see the boy one last time before I head to a hotel. Just to say goodnight, to make sure he knows I am not angry at him. Brittany sighed, checking her manicure. Make it quick, she said. He needs his rest. And don't rile him up, Winston. If he gets excited, he won't sleep, and then I have to deal with him all tomorrow. I won't, I promised. I walked past them. I walked through the kitchen, through the laundry room, and to the door that led to the garage. My hand shook as I turned the knob. I stepped into the cold darkness. Leo was still awake. He was sitting up on the mattress, clutching the Carhartt coat I had left him. When he saw me, his eyes widened with fear. "Did you tell them?" he whispered. "Are they mad?" I knelt down beside him. I put a finger to my lips. "Shh," I whispered. "No, Leo. Nobody is mad." I told them I was sorry. I told them I was wrong. Leo looked confused. But you weren't wrong, Grandpa. It is cold. I know, son." I said, leaning in close so my voice wouldn't carry. "I know. But listen to me. This is a game. A secret game just for you and me." I reached into the deep pocket of my cargo pants. I pulled out my watch. It wasn't a Rolex. It wasn't jewelry. It was a Garmin tactical watch, the kind I used when I went hiking in the Rockies. It was rugged, waterproof, and it had a battery life that lasted for weeks. But more importantly, it had a voice memo function and a GPS tracker that I could monitor from my phone. I held it out to him. "What is this?" Leo asked. "This is a spy gadget," I said, my voice low and serious. "Like in the movies." I took his small, cold hand and pressed the watch into it. "I need you to be my spy, Leo. I need you to keep this safe. Do not wear it. Do not let Brittany or your dad see it." "Where do I put it?" he asked, looking at the black device with awe. I lifted the corner of the mattress. There was a small tear in the fabric of the underside. "Put it inside the mattress," I instructed. "Right here." Leo slid the watch into the foam. "Now listen, Grandpa," I said, grabbing his shoulders gently. "This watch is going to record everything. When Brittany yells at you, when she makes you stay out here, when you are cold. I want you to remember that Grandpa is listening. You are not alone. Every word she says is going to be sent to me." Leo nodded, his eyes wide. "And there is a button on the side," I continued, pointing to the small red marker I had painted on the SOS button years ago. "If you ever feel like you can't breathe, if you get sick, if she hits you, you press this button and hold it for 3 seconds. Can you do that?" "I can do that," Leo whispered. "I'm going to come back for you, Leo," I promised him, my voice thick with emotion. "I have to go now so they don't get suspicious. But I am coming back. And when I do, I am bringing an army." "You promise?" he asked, a single tear sliding down his dirty cheek. "I swear on your mother's soul," I said. I kissed his forehead. He smelled of oil and exhaust fumes, but to me he smelled like the only thing worth living for. "Stay warm, spy," I whispered. I stood up, my knees cracked. I walked back to the door. I looked back one last time. Leo had laid back down, pulling my coat over his head. He looked small, but he didn't look terrified anymore. He looked like a soldier on a mission. I stepped back into the house. Damon was waiting in the kitchen, eating a slice of leftover pizza. He looked guilty, but relief was washing over him. "He is asleep," I said, keeping my face blank. "Good," Damon said with his mouth full. "Look, Dad, about the room. We can talk about it tomorrow. Brittany just needs her space, you know." "I know," I said. "She is a creative woman. Creativity needs room to breathe." I walked to the front door. Brittany didn't come to say goodbye. She was already back upstairs, probably ordering more ribbon online with my money. "Drive safe, Dad," Damon called out. I opened the door and walked out into the night. I climbed into my truck. I started the engine. The heater roared to life, blasting hot air into the cab. I looked at the house one last time. "Enjoy the heat." "Damon," I whispered to the dark window, "enjoy it while it lasts, because winter is coming for you." I put the truck in gear and drove away. I didn't go to a hotel. I drove 2 blocks over and parked in a spot where I could see the street, but they couldn't see me. I pulled out my phone. I opened the tracking app. A small green dot blinked on the screen. "Target acquired." I reclined my seat. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to listen, and God help them if I heard the wrong thing. The sun rose over the wealthy suburbs of Atlanta at 6:30 in the morning, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that looked deceptively innocent. I had not slept. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand, and my back ached from sitting in the driver's seat of my truck for 7 hours straight. But I didn't care about the pain. Pain keeps you sharp. Pain reminds you that you are still alive and that you have a job to do. I watched the house from down the street. At 7 o'clock sharp, the lights in the kitchen flickered on. Through the sheer curtains, I could see movement. It was the frantic choreographed movement of a morning routine. I picked up my phone. I opened the tracking app connected to the watch I had hidden in Leo's mattress. The green dot was stationary. It was still in the garage. My heart clenched. They hadn't even let him in to brush his teeth yet. I put on my headphones. I wanted to hear the morning wake-up call. The audio from the garage was quiet at first, just the sound of Leo's shallow breathing. Then I heard the heavy mechanical sound of the garage door opening from the inside. "Get up," a female voice snapped. It was Brittany. "And leave the blankets there. You smell like gasoline. Go hose off in the utility sink before you come into my kitchen." I heard the sound of water running. Cold water. I heard Leo gasping. I ripped the headphones off. I couldn't listen to that from a distance. I had to be there. I had to see it. I needed the visual evidence to match the audio recording. I started the truck and drove the 2 blocks to the house. I parked right in the driveway behind Brittany's white Range Rover. I wanted her to know I was there. I wanted her to feel the pressure. I walked to the front door and let myself in. The door was unlocked. The smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of melted butter, warm maple syrup, and frying bacon. It was the smell of a childhood I had tried to give my son and the smell of a home I thought I had paid for. I walked into the kitchen. It was a scene straight out of a magazine. The granite island was covered in food. There were stacks of fluffy golden pancakes studded with blueberries that looked like jewels. There was a platter of crispy bacon. There was a pitcher of freshly squeezed orange juice. Sitting at the main table were my 2 other grandchildren, Kyle and Kaylee. Kyle is 10, Kaylee is 8. They are Brittany's biological children from her first marriage. I have always treated them like my own blood because family is family. I paid for their private school. I bought them iPads. They were digging into the pancakes, laughing and arguing over the syrup. Morning Grandpa Kyle mumbled his mouthful of food. I nodded at them. Morning, kids. Then I looked for Leo. He wasn't at the table. I scanned the room. At first, I didn't see him. The kitchen is huge and open concept space that flows into the living room. Then I saw him. He was in the corner near the mudroom door about 20 feet away from the family table. He was sitting in an old manual wheelchair, not his electric one. The chair was too small for him. His knees were cramped up against his chest. He was sitting at a small folding card table, the kind you use for puzzles or for the kids' table at Thanksgiving when you run out of room. But there was plenty of room at the main table. There were 2 empty chairs. I walked over to him. On the flimsy table in front of him was a single plastic bowl. Inside was a gray, lumpy substance that looked like wallpaper paste. Oatmeal, made with water, not milk, no sugar, no fruit, just gray sludge. Leo looked up at me. His hair was wet. His face was pale. He looked terrified. "Hey, Grandpa," he whispered. "Why are you sitting here, son?" I asked, my voice loud enough to cut through the chatter at the main table. Brittany turned around from the stove where she was flipping more pancakes. She was wearing an apron that said Mama Bear in glittery letters. She flashed me a bright, tight smile. "Oh, Winston, you are back early," she said. "Grab a plate. There is plenty of bacon." I pointed at Leo. "I asked why my grandson is eating gruel at a card table in the corner," I said. Brittany sighed, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "We have rules, Winston," she said, as if explaining quantum physics to a toddler. "Leo's wheelchair tires are dirty. They bring in grit from the outside. We just refinished these hardwood floors last month. It cost $4,000. I can't have him scratching up the mahogany." "He slept in the garage," I said. "Of course his tires are dirty." "Exactly," she said. "That is why he eats in the designated zone. It is easier to clean up if he spills. You know how clumsy he is with his hands?" She turned back to the stove. "And the food?" I asked, looking at the bowl of gray slime. "The other kids are eating blueberries and bacon." "Leo has a special diet," Brittany said without missing a beat. "Gluten inflames his joints, and sugar makes him hyperactive. Dr. Evans said we need to keep him on a strict anti-inflammatory protocol. Oats are good for his heart." I looked at Leo. He was staring at his bowl, trying to swallow a spoonful of the tasteless mush. I knew for a fact that Leo wasn't allergic to gluten. I knew because I had taken him out for pizza 100 times before his accident, and he had eaten it with joy. This was punishment. It was starvation disguised as medicine. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to take that plate of bacon and feed it to Leo myself, but I felt the weight of my phone in my pocket. I remembered Finch's words. "We need proof." I took a deep breath. "I see," I said. "You are very thorough, Brittany." "I try," she said. Suddenly her phone alarm chimed. A cheerful little bell sound. Brittany's face transformed. The annoyance vanished. The boredom vanished. In their place appeared a radiant, glowing mask of maternal joy. "Okay, everyone, time for the morning update," she announced. She pulled a ring light out of the pantry. She set up her phone on a tripod on the kitchen island. She fluffed her hair. She adjusted her apron. She looked at Kyle and Kaylee. "Quiet eating kids, Mommy is filming." She looked at Leo. "Leo, wheel over here," she commanded. "But the floor," I said, playing dumb. "It is fine for a minute," Brittany snapped. "Hurry up, we are losing the light." Leo struggled to turn the manual wheels. His hands were raw and blistered from the cold and the friction. He slowly rolled across the kitchen floor, approaching the island. Brittany grabbed the back of his chair and yanked him into the frame. She positioned him so that he was slightly below her, making her look like a guardian angel standing over him. She hit record. "Hey guys, it is Brittany. Welcome back to another day in the life of a special needs mama," she chirped. Her voice was an octave higher than normal. It was sweet, sugary, and fake as a $3 bill. She waved at the camera. "We are just having a slow Tuesday morning here. I got up at 4 a.m. to make blueberry pancakes for the troupe. It is exhausting, but seeing their smiles makes it all worth it, right, guys?" She panned the camera to Kyle and Kaylee, who had been trained to smile on command. They waved, holding up their forks. "And here is my warrior Leo," she said, wrapping her arms around Leo's neck. Leo stiffened. I saw him flinch. He looked like a hostage. "He is having a rough pain day today," she said, her voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper. "His joints are hurting, so we are sticking to his special oatmeal. It is not as fun as pancakes, but health comes first, right, buddy?" She squeezed his shoulders hard. "Right, Leo," she prompted through gritted teeth. "Right," Leo whispered. Brittany beamed at the camera. "We are just taking it 1 hour at a time. Send us some prayers and good vibes today. We need them. Remember, love is an action verb." Then she did it. She leaned down. She pressed her cheek against Leo's. She kissed his forehead right above his eyebrow. "Love you, buddy," she said. "Love you." "D. Brittany," Leo mumbled, reciting his lines. "Bye, guys. See you in the stories." She waved and reached out to tap the screen, ending the recording. The second the red light went off, the smile dropped from her face like a stone falling off a cliff. She stood up abruptly, pushing Leo's wheelchair away from her. "Ugh," she muttered. She grabbed a paper towel from the roll. She wiped her lips where they had touched Leo's skin. She wiped her cheek. She scrubbed it like she had touched toxic waste. "You are greasy, Leo," she snapped, throwing the paper towel into the trash. "Did you even wash your face properly?" "I did," Leo said, looking down. The water was cold. Brittany ignored him. She was already typing on her phone, adding captions and filters to the video. "All right, back to your table," she said, waving her hand without looking up. "And finish that oatmeal. We have chores to do. I need you to sort the recycling in the garage before lunch." I stood there watching this performance, and I felt a cold knot of nausea in my stomach. I had seen bad things in my life. I had seen men get hurt on job sites. I had seen fights in bars. But I had never seen anything as ugly as that kiss. It was a Judas kiss. A kiss sold for likes and views. I walked over to the trash can. I looked inside. The paper towel was there, crumpled and stained with her lipstick. I reached in and took it. Brittany looked up. "What are you doing, Winston? That is trash." I put the paper towel in my pocket. "Just cleaning up," I said. "I hate to see things go to waste." I looked at Leo one last time. He was back in his corner eating his gray sludge while his step-siblings licked syrup off their fingers. I turned to Brittany. "You are a very talented actress, Brittany," I said, my voice flat. She smiled, taking it as a compliment. "Social media is a business, Winston," she said. "You have to sell the story. People love a tragedy. It makes them feel better about their own lives. You are selling a tragedy, all right, I thought, but you don't know the ending yet." "I am going to head out," I said. "I have some errands to run in town." "Don't be late for dinner," Brittany said, distracted by her phone. "We are having guests. Try to look presentable." "Oh, I will be presentable," I promised. I walked out of the kitchen. As I passed Leo, I tapped my pocket where the watch receiver was. He looked at me and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The spy was in place. The evidence was growing. I walked out to my truck. I took the paper towel out of my pocket. I put it in a Ziploc bag I kept in the glove box. Why did I keep it? I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to remember the exact shade of lipstick she wore while she starved my grandson. Or maybe I knew that in the court of public opinion, a picture of a mother wiping off her son's kiss would be worth 1,000 words. I started the engine. Time time to go to the bank, time to follow the money. Because if there is one thing I know about people like Brittany, it is that their cruelty is always expensive. I left the house with the taste of fake maple syrup and bitter lies coating my tongue. I didn't look back at the window where Brittany was probably editing her video, filtering out the misery of her stepson to garner likes from strangers. I had a job to do, and for the first time in years I felt the old familiar hum of focus that I used to get before a major commercial installation. I wasn't just a grandfather anymore. I was an auditor, and I was about to conduct the most ruthless inspection of my life. I drove straight to the downtown branch of the First National Bank of Atlanta. It was an imposing building with marble pillars and glass doors that hissed shut behind you, sealing you in a world of quiet wealth. I had set up the Leo Carter Special Needs Trust 5 years ago, right after the accident. I had put $300,000 of my own money into it. It was supposed to be a fortress. It was supposed to be the one thing in Leo's life that couldn't be touched by tragedy. I walked up to the desk. The teller was a young woman with a kind smile. "I need to speak to the branch manager," I said. "My name is Winston Carter. I am the grantor of trust account number 4490. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a plush leather chair in a corner office. The manager, Mr. Henderson, was a man I had known for years. He looked nervous. Bankers have a sixth sense for trouble, and I walked in there smelling like a storm. "Winston," he said, adjusting his tie. "Good to see you. We haven't seen you in person in a while. Usually it is Mrs. Carter who handles the withdrawals." I didn't smile. "That is why I am here," I said. "I want to see the activity log for the last 12 months, and I want the full itemized breakdown, not the summary, the raw data." Mr. Henderson hesitated. "Technically, she is the trustee, Winston. She has discretion over the funds for the child's welfare." I leaned forward. "Mr. Henderson, I put that money there. If you don't print those papers in the next 30 seconds, I will close every commercial account I have with this bank, and I will tell every business owner in Atlanta why." He paled. He turned to his computer. The printer whirred to life. He handed me a stack of paper about an inch thick. It was warm. I put on my reading glasses. I wet my thumb. I started to read. The first few pages were standard. Utility bills, a specialized wheelchair ramp installation from 2 years ago. Fair enough. Then came the shift. It started about 8 months ago. Small things at first. A withdrawal of $200 at a high-end grocery store. Okay, maybe Leo needed special organic food. Then a charge for $400 at Sephora. I looked up at Mr. Henderson. "Since when does a 15-year-old boy need anti-aging cream and contouring palettes?" I asked, my voice low. Mr. Henderson looked at his shoes. She listed it as personal care supplies. Hygiene is covered under the trust." I turned the page. Lululemon, $600. Nordstrom, $800. Apple Store, $2,000 for a MacBook Pro. Leo doesn't have a MacBook. I saw his room. He doesn't even have a desk. The pages went on and on. It was a hemorrhage. It was a bleeding wound of vanity and greed. Every time Brittany felt sad, she dipped into my grandson's future to buy herself a present. Every time she wanted to look good for Instagram, she stole from a crippled boy. But then I saw it. Page 12, a withdrawal dated 3 weeks ago. It wasn't a few $100s, it was $45,000. The payee was listed as Miller Construction, LLC. I froze. Miller Construction, I read aloud. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Yes. Mrs. Carter submitted an invoice for that. She stated it was for, let me check the notes. Structural modifications to the home for accessibility. A hydrotherapy wing. Hydrotherapy," I repeated. "Yes. She said the doctor recommended aquatic therapy for the boy's legs. She said they were building a specialized therapeutic pool." I felt the blood drain from my face. A pool. I closed the folder. I stood up. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said. "I will be keeping these." I walked out of the bank. I didn't go to my truck. I walked across the street to a greasy spoon diner where a man was waiting for me in the back booth. His name was Vance. He was a private investigator Finch had recommended. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and left out in the rain. He didn't ask questions, he just found answers. I sat down. I threw the bank statement on the table. "Miller Construction," I said. "Who are they?" Vance took a sip of his black coffee. He pulled a manila envelope from his jacket pocket. "They are a high-end residential contractor," he said. "They specialize in luxury outdoor living spaces." He slid a photo across the table. It was a drone shot, an aerial view of my son's house taken probably yesterday. I looked at the backyard. There was a massive hole in the ground. Rebar was laid out. Concrete had been poured. It was the shape of a kidney bean. "That is not a hydrotherapy wing," Vance said, pointing with a calloused finger. "That is a luxury saltwater infinity pool with a built-in tanning ledge and a fire pit." I stared at the photo, a tanning ledge. She wasn't building a place for Leo to exercise. She was building a backdrop for her bikini photos. She was building a place where she could sip margaritas while Leo rotted in the garage. And the cost I asked, $80,000 total, Vance said. She paid $45,000 up front. The rest is due on completion, $45,000. The number rang in my head like a funeral bell. I knew that number. I knew exactly what that number meant. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled back through my emails to a conversation I had with an orthopedic surgeon in Boston 6 months ago. "Mr. Carter, the tendon release surgery for Leo is promising. It won't make him walk perfectly, but it will allow him to stand. It will allow him to transfer from his chair to a bed without help. It will give him independence. The cost is roughly $45,000 and insurance won't cover it because they deem it elective." I had told Damon to schedule it. I had told him the money was in the trust. I looked at the drone photo. I looked at the hole in the ground. She didn't just steal money. She stole his legs. She stole his chance to stand up. She stole his chance to look a man in the eye at eye level. She took the surgery that would have given him a life and she turned it into a hole in the ground filled with salt water. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was the condensation of a rage so hot it was steaming. Vance looked at me. "You want me to shut it down?" he asked. "I know the inspector. I can find a code violation." "No," I said, wiping the tear away. "Let them build it." Vance raised an eyebrow. "Let them finish it," I said. "Let her fill it with water. Let her put out her lounge chairs. Let her think she got away with it." I picked up the bank statements. "You see, Vance, when you trap a rat, you don't catch it when it is hungry. You catch it when it is fat and slow and thinks it owns the house." I looked at the charge for Sephora again. "Does she have any other accounts?" I asked. Vance nodded. "She has a personal account, hidden from your son. I found deposits from her social media sponsorships. Not much. Maybe $1,000 a month. But she spends every dime of it on credit card payments. She is drowning in debt, Winston. She is robbing Peter to pay Paul and robbing Leo to pay everyone else. Get me everything I said. I want her credit report. I want her DMs. I want to know what she ate for lunch in 2010. I stood up. "Where are you going?" Vance asked. "I am going to the hardware store," I said. "The hardware store." "If she wants to build a pool," I said, putting on my hat, "I think I should help with the renovations. After all, I am an HVAC man. I know a lot about heating systems, and I think things are about to get very uncomfortable in that house." I walked out of the diner. The sun was high in the sky now. It was a beautiful day, a perfect day for construction. I drove past the house one more time. I saw the cement trucks pouring the deck for the pool. I saw Brittany standing on the back porch, pointing and shouting orders at the workers. She looked like a general commanding her troops. She had taken the money meant to fix a crippled boy's legs and used it to build a monument to her own vanity. I touched the picture of Leo in my pocket. "Hold on, son," I whispered. "Just hold on. She is building a pool, but she doesn't know she is digging her own grave." 2 days had passed since I stood in that kitchen and watched my daughter-in-law wipe my grandson's kiss off her cheek like it was poison. 2 days of sitting in a Motel 6 down the highway, staring at the screen of my phone until my eyes burned. 2 days of watching a little green dot on a GPS map that didn't move from the garage, except for brief intervals when I assumed he was allowed to use the bathroom. I had been monitoring the audio feeds from the watch I hid in the mattress. Most of it was silence. The heavy, suffocating silence of a child who knows that making a sound brings punishment. Occasionally I heard the roar of the lawnmower engine when Damon came in to get a tool, or the sharp click of Brittany's heels as she came to do laundry. She never spoke to him. She just moved around him like he was a piece of furniture she hadn't gotten around to throwing out yet. But on the afternoon of the second day, the silence broke. It wasn't a sound. It was an alarm. My phone vibrated on the cheap laminate table of the motel room. It was a notification from the health monitoring app connected to Leo's watch. High heart rate alert, 120 beats per minute. I sat up straight, knocking over my cup of cold coffee. 120 beats per minute. He wasn't exercising, he wasn't moving. According to the gyroscope data, he was lying perfectly still. I tapped the screen. The graph was spiking. 125, 130. Then came the text message. It took him a long time to type it. I could see the little typing bubble appear and disappear as his trembling fingers struggled with the small screen of the watch hidden under his pillow. Grandpa, I can't breathe. My chest hurts. I stared at those words, and for a moment I forgot I was 73 years old. I forgot I had high blood pressure. I felt a surge of adrenaline so potent it nearly blinded me. I didn't think. I dialed Damon. Pick up, I growled at the phone, pacing the small length of the motel room. Pick up the damn phone, son. It rang 4 times, 5 times. Finally he answered. Hello. He sounded distracted. I could hear the television in the background, the sound of a football game. Damon, I said, my voice tight and controlled. You need to go to the garage right now. Dad, he sighed. I told you we need some space. You can't just call and demand, shut up and listen to me, I roared, cutting him off. I am not calling to chat. I am calling because Leo's heart rate is 130 beats per minute. He just texted me. He says he can't breathe. There was a silence on the other end. How do you know his heart rate? Damon asked slowly. I put a tracker on him, I said. I don't care if you are mad about it. I don't care if it is an invasion of privacy. Right now, your son is in respiratory distress. He is lying on a concrete floor in 40-degree weather, and his lungs are failing. Go check on him. Now. I heard Damon shuffling. I heard him cover the phone. I heard him whisper something to Brittany. Then I heard her voice in the background, high-pitched and annoyed. He is fine, Damon. He is just doing it for attention. He knows his grandpa is in town. Damon came back on the line. Dad, Brittany says he is okay. He was coughing a little earlier, but she gave him some medicine. He is probably just worked up because he wants to see you. He is not worked up, I shouted. He is dying. Damon, look at the numbers. A resting heart rate of 130 means his body is fighting an infection. It means he is septic or he has pneumonia. You take him to the emergency room right now, or so help me. God, I will bring the police to your door in 5 minutes. I heard the phone fumble. Then the sound changed. The background noise of the football game got louder, then sharper. Brittany had taken the phone. Winston, she said. Her voice was ice cold. You listen to me, Brittany, I said, fighting the urge to throw the phone through the wall. The boy is sick. He needs a doctor, not a nap, not a timeout. A doctor. Oh, please, she scoffed. You are so dramatic. I went out there an hour ago. He felt a little warm. That is all. A little warm, I repeated. Brittany, fever is the body's response to infection. If he is warm in a freezing garage, it means he is burning up from the inside. He is not freezing, she snapped. He has blankets. And as for the medicine, I am handling it. We don't believe in pumping his body full of synthetic chemicals every time he gets a sniffle. I am using a holistic approach. Holistic? I asked, my stomach turning. Yes, she said proudly. I gave him a dose of eucalyptus oil, and I rubbed a thieves' oil blend on his chest. It helps open the airways naturally, and I put a diffuser out there with peppermint. It is better for his immune system than antibiotics. Oil, I whispered. You gave a boy with pneumonia. Oil. It is high-grade essential oil, Winston, she said, defensive now. It costs $60 a bottle. It is very potent. He just needs to rest and let the toxins release. But he can't rest if you keep texting him and getting him agitated. Agitated, I screamed. He is gasping for air, Brittany. He is faking it, she yelled back. He is a manipulative little boy, Winston. He knows exactly what buttons to push to make you feel sorry for him. He doesn't want to do his physical therapy exercises, so he pretends he is sick. I am not falling for it, and neither should you. I closed my eyes. I pictured Leo. I pictured the mold I suspected was growing behind that drywall. I pictured his lungs filling with fluid while he inhaled peppermint fumes that were probably irritating his already inflamed respiratory system. Brittany, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. If that boy dies tonight, it will not be an accident. It will be murder. There was a pause. For a second, I thought maybe I had reached her. Maybe the word murder had pierced her armor of self-righteousness. But I was wrong. "Don't you threaten me, Winston," she hissed. "You have no rights here. You are just a sad, lonely old man who is jealous of my family." She lowered her voice. "And if you call the police again, I will file a restraining order. I will tell them you are harassing us. I will tell them you threatened to hit me. Who do you think they will believe? The mother of the year or the angry grandfather with a history of anger issues?" She didn't wait for an answer. Click. The line went dead. I stood there in the middle of the motel room, holding the phone to my ear. The dial tone sounded like a flat line. I looked at the screen again. 135 beats per minute. It was climbing. I felt a coldness settle over me. It was a different kind of cold than the garage. This was the cold clarity of a man who realizes that the rules of engagement have changed. I had tried to play by the rules. I had tried to be polite. I had tried to be the checkbook grandfather. I had listened to Finch. I had gathered evidence. But evidence takes time, and Leo didn't have time. If I called the police now, she would charm them. She would show them the oils. She would say he was under her care. She would say I was crazy. And by the time CPS investigated, Leo might be dead. Or worse, they would take him to the hospital, treat him, and send him right back to her because she was the legal guardian who made a judgment call. No. I needed to get him out. Permanently. I needed to destroy her standing. I needed to strip her of her power, her house, and her reputation. And I couldn't do that from a motel room. I needed to be inside. I looked at the bank app on my phone. I looked at the balance of my liquid assets. I had worked hard for 40 years. I had saved. I had invested. I had money that Brittany could only dream of in her cheap influencer fantasies. She wanted a lifestyle. She wanted luxury. She wanted people to envy her. That was her weakness. Greed. She wouldn't let me in to save Leo, but she would let me in to give her money. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My hands stopped shaking. I pulled up the number for a contractor friend of mine back in Detroit. A man named Miller. No relation to the guy building her pool, but a man who owed me a favor. Then I texted Finch. "Draft a contract. I am buying the renovation." Finch texted back immediately. "What are you doing, Winston?" "I told you to wait." "I am done waiting," I typed back. "I am changing tactics. I am not the grandfather anymore. I am the investor." I stood up and walked to the mirror. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at the man staring back. He looked tired. He looked old, but his eyes were burning. I looked at the phone one last time. "Hang in there, Leo," I whispered. "I am coming, and I am bringing a sledgehammer." I sat in my truck for 10 minutes outside the house just breathing. I had to lower my blood pressure. I had to slow my heart rate. If I walked in there with the fury that was currently boiling my blood, I would end up in handcuffs and Leo would end up dead. I had to put on a mask. I had to become the thing Brittany thought I was. A senile, defeated checkbook with legs. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were trembling slightly, not from age, but from the effort of holding back violence. I clenched them into fists, then released them. "Showtime, Winston," I whispered to myself. I grabbed the clipboard I had bought at the hardware store. It was a simple prop, but in the construction business, a clipboard gives you authority. It says you are looking at the structure, not the people. I walked up the driveway. I didn't ring the bell. I knocked firmly 3 times. Damon opened the door. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he was wearing the same sweatpants as before. When he saw me, he flinched instinctively, raising a hand as if to block a blow or an accusation. "Dad, look." "Brittany is really upset about the phone call," he started, his voice whining and thin. "You can't just accuse us of—" I held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "I know, son," I said, keeping my voice low and devoid of emotion. "I know. I overreacted." Damon blinked, confused by my surrender. You did?" I stepped past him into the foyer. The heat of the house hit me again, a stark reminder of the cold garage just a few yards away. "I was worried," I said, taking off my hat. "You know how I get. I hear the boy is sick and my mind goes to the worst place. It is the grandfather in me. I forget that you two are the parents. I forget that you have a plan." Brittany appeared from the kitchen. She was holding a glass of wine, even though it was barely 2 in the afternoon. She looked at me with cold suspicion, her eyes narrowing like a snake sizing up a rat. "Back so soon, Winston," she said, taking a sip. "I thought I told you we needed space. Unless you are here to apologize for threatening me, I suggest you turn around. I am here to apologize. I lied. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I swallowed them. And I am here to offer a solution. Brittany raised an eyebrow. A solution to what? To the space issue, I said. I walked into the living room and spread my arms encompassing the house. I looked around, I said. I see what you are doing here, Brittany. You are building a lifestyle. You have the craft room. You have the open concept kitchen. You have the flow. And I realized something last night. I paused, letting them wait for it. I realized that having a teenager, especially a special needs teenager in the middle of all this, it disrupts the aesthetic. It disrupts the peace. Brittany lowered her wine glass slightly. Her interest was piqued. She nodded slowly. It does, she agreed. It is very difficult to maintain a calm environment when there is medical equipment everywhere, and the noise, and the mess. Exactly, I said. And putting him in the garage. Well, I understand the logic. It is separate. It is quiet. But let's be honest, Brittany, it looks bad. If the neighbors see it, they talk, and you don't want people talking. Brittany stiffened. No, I don't. So here is my proposal, I said, tapping my clipboard. I want to finish the job. What do you mean? Damon asked. I want to renovate the garage, I said. I don't mean a coat of paint, I mean a full conversion. I want to turn that garage into a high-end detached suite. I am talking about insulation, drywall heated floors, a proper HVAC system, a kitchenette and a roll-in bathroom with marble tile. I watched Brittany's face. I watched the greed fight with the suspicion. Marble tile, she repeated. Quartz countertops, I added, throwing in a buzzword I knew she loved. Smart lighting. Voice-controlled blinds, a fully soundproofed private apartment where Leo can have his episodes without disturbing your peace. It will add at least $50,000 to the property value of the house. I saw the light go on in her eyes. It was the only light that ever really shone there, the light of avarice. She wasn't thinking about Leo being warm. She was thinking about Zillow. She was thinking about resale value. She was thinking about a guest house she could use for her Instagram photos once Leo was gone. You would pay for this, she asked, trying to sound casual but failing. 100%, I said. I have the money sitting there. I was going to save it for his college, but let's be real. He needs comfort now more than a degree later. Brittany took a step forward. Her entire demeanor changed. The Ice Queen melted into the eager saleswoman. Well, she said, putting her wine glass down. That is actually a very generous offer, Winston. We have been talking about upgrading the garage eventually. We just didn't have the budget right now because of other projects. I knew she meant the pool, the hole in the ground that ate my money. I understand, I said. Life is expensive. Let me handle this. It is the least I can do to help you burden the load. Brittany smiled. It was a shark smile. That sounds wonderful, Dad, she said, using the word dad for the first time in months. In fact, this is perfect timing. I know a contractor, Miller Construction. They are doing some work in the backyard. They are fantastic. I can call them right now and get a quote. I felt a spike of adrenaline. Miller, the man building the pool, the man who was probably overcharging her and kicking back cash. No, I said sharply. Brittany froze. Why not? They are already here. Because I don't pay retail. Brittany, I said, slipping back into my persona of the hard-nosed businessman. I didn't get rich by writing blank checks to suburban contractors who mark up materials 30%. I walked over to the window and looked out at the driveway. I am in the trade, I said, turning back to them. I have connections. I have a crew that I have worked with for 20 years. They owe me favors. They work fast, they work cheap, and they do it to my specs. But Brittany started to argue. No buts, I cut her off. My money, my crew. That is the deal. If you want Miller to do it, you pay him. If you want me to pay for the quartz and the heated floors, my guys do the work. I stared her down. I knew she didn't have the money. I knew she was maxed out. If she wanted this upgrade, she had to take it on my terms. She looked at Damon. Damon shrugged. It saves us money, Britt, he mumbled. She looked back at me. She did the math in her head. A free $50,000 renovation versus control. Greed won. It always wins with people like her. Fine, she said, smoothing her silk robe. But I want final approval on the finishes. I don't want it looking industrial. I want it to match the main house. Modern farmhouse aesthetic. Done, I said, writing nothing on my clipboard. Modern farmhouse. Shiplap and subway tile. Whatever you want. When can they start? She asked. Tomorrow morning, I said. 7 a.m. Tomorrow, she gasped. That is too soon. The garage is a mess. We need to clean it out. We need to move Leo. Don't move a thing, I commanded. My guys do the demo. That includes clearing the junk. You don't lift a finger. That is part of the service. And as for Leo, leave him there. Leave him there, she asked, confused. While you are working, we will work around him for the first day, I said. We need to measure the space with him in it to make sure the accessibility is perfect. We will set up a temporary barrier. He will be fine. I couldn't let them move Leo back into the house. If they moved him, they might clean him up. They might hide the bruises. I needed him exactly where he was when the crew arrived. Brittany hesitated. It seemed fast. It seemed aggressive. But the promise of a free renovation was too sweet to resist. Okay, she said. 7 a.m. But tell them to use the side entrance. I don't want muddy boots in my foyer. I promise you, Brittany, I said, my voice grim. You won't even know they are here until it is too late. I mean, until the job is done, I corrected myself quickly. Great, she said, clapping her hands. Well, this is exciting. Finally, we are all on the same page. She picked up her wine glass again. Would you like a glass, Winston? To celebrate? No, thank you, I said. I have to go make some calls. Getting a crew together this fast takes some pulling of strings. I walked to the door. Damon followed me, looking like a puppy that had just avoided being kicked. Thanks, Dad, he whispered. This is really huge. It will take a lot of pressure off Brittany. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who stood by while his wife negotiated the aesthetics of his son's prison cell. It is going to take the pressure off, all right, I said. I walked out to my truck. I sat inside and locked the doors. I pulled out my phone and dialed Finch. We are in, I said. Did she take the bait? Finch asked. She swallowed it whole, I said. Hook, line, and sinker. She thinks she is getting a guest house. And what is she really getting? Finch asked. I looked at the house. I saw Brittany moving in the window, probably measuring curtains for a room that didn't exist yet. She is getting a forensic audit, I said. I dialed the next number. It wasn't a contractor. It was a man named Miller, but not her Miller. This was Big Mike Miller, a certified building inspector and former police detective who ran a private security firm in Detroit. Mike, I said when he picked up, pack your bags and bring the team. What is the job? Mike asked. Demolition, I said. We are tearing down a house. No, I said, starting the engine. We are tearing down a life. Be here at 6 a.m. And Mike, yeah, boss, bring the cameras, the high-definition ones. We are going to make a movie. The sun had not yet cleared the horizon when my army arrived. It was 6 a.m. and the sky was a bruised purple, but the street in front of my son's house looked like a construction zone. I had called in every favor I had banked in 40 years of business. 3 white, unmarked vans pulled up to the curb in a silent convoy. These weren't just guys with hammers. These were certified building inspectors, forensic structural engineers, and a private investigator named Vance, who could find a needle in a haystack if the needle was trying to hide. I stood on the driveway holding my clipboard, watching them unload. They wore heavy work boots and tool belts, but in their pockets were high-definition body cameras recording everything. I had briefed them at a diner at 4 a.m. I told them we were not building a guest house. We were building a case. Mike Miller, the foreman, walked up to me. He was a man the size of a vending machine with hands like shovels. He looked at the house, then he looked at me. We ready to open it up, boss? He asked, his voice a low rumble. Tear it down, Mike, I said, but gently. I want to see what is behind every single wall. At 6:30, the front door of the house flew open. Brittany stormed out, wrapping her silk robe tight around her body. Her hair was in rollers, and she looked furious. Winston, she hissed, marching down the driveway. It is 6:30 in the morning. What is wrong with you? You said 7. You are waking up the neighbors. I checked my watch. Construction waits for no man. Brittany, I said calmly, and certainly not for the neighbors. My guys are on a tight schedule. You want your farmhouse chic garage, don't you? She looked at the vans. She looked at the men carrying sledgehammers and sawzalls. The greed warred with the annoyance on her face. The greed won. Fine, she snapped. Just tell them to keep it down, and don't let them use the main house bathroom. I don't want mud on my runners. They have their own facilities, I said, pointing to the portable toilet on the trailer. Go back to sleep, Brittany. We will handle the heavy lifting. She turned on her heel and stomped back inside, slamming the door. I signaled to Mike. Let's go. We entered the garage. It was freezing. The thermometer read 42 degrees. Leo was awake, sitting on his mattress, clutching the coat I had given him. When he saw the men filing in, filling the small space with their bulk and their tools, he shrank back against the wall, his eyes wide with terror. It is okay, Leo, I said, stepping forward. These are my friends. They are here to fix things. Mike looked at the boy. He looked at the mattress on the concrete. He looked at the lawnmower inches from the boy's head. I saw Mike's jaw tighten. I saw his knuckles turn white around the handle of his sledgehammer. He was a father of 3. I knew he wanted to use that hammer on something other than drywall right now. Easy, Mike, I whispered. Focus on the wall. We set up a plastic containment barrier separating Leo's corner from the work zone. It was just a sheet of clear plastic, but it gave the illusion of safety. Okay, boys, Mike commanded. Open up the north wall. Let's see why it is so cold in here. The sound of demolition began, the screech of nails being pulled, the crack of gypsum boards snapping. Dust filled the air, swirling in the beams of the work lights. I stood back watching. I knew this house. I knew the builder who put it up 10 years ago. He was cheap, but he wasn't incompetent. There was no reason for this garage to be this cold unless the insulation had been stripped or compromised. Boss Mike called out, "You need to see this." I walked over. Mike had removed a large section of drywall right behind where Leo's head had been resting. He pointed his flashlight into the wall cavity. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of old wood or dust. It was an earthy, pungent smell. Musty. Rotting. It smelled like death. I leaned in. The fiberglass insulation was black. Not dirty. Black. A thick slime coated the studs in the back of the drywall. It looked like someone had painted the inside of the wall with tar. Stacky bottress Mike said, his voice grim. Black mold. Toxic. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I knew about black mold. In the HVAC business, we call it the silent killer. It causes respiratory failure, cognitive issues, bleeding in the lungs, and Leo had been sleeping 6 inches away from it for weeks. But that wasn't the worst part. Mike shined his light on the studs. Look at this, he said, pointing to a streak of white. I leaned closer. On the wooden stud right over the black mold, there was a layer of white paint. Primer. Specifically Kills primer, the kind used to block stains. Someone had tried to paint over the mold. This isn't old growth, Mike said, running a gloved finger over the paint. This primer is fresh, maybe a month old. And they didn't remediate it. They didn't cut out the rot. They just slapped paint over it to hide the color and put the drywall back up. My knees felt weak. A month ago. That was when Brittany said she was deep cleaning the garage. That was when she moved Leo out here. She knew. She knew the walls were rotting. She knew the air was toxic. And instead of fixing it, she painted over it to hide the evidence and put a disabled child with a compromised immune system right next to it. This wasn't negligence. This was biological warfare. Document it. I said, my voice trembling. Every inch, Mike. Take samples. Get the lab reports. I want to know exactly what strain this is and how lethal it is. Mike nodded, signaling the photographer. The flash of the camera lit up the rotting wall like lightning. I stepped out of the work zone, needing fresh air. I walked over to the plastic barrier where Leo was watching. He was coughing into his sleeve, that dry, hacking cough that had terrified me 2 nights ago. Leo, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Did Brittany ever paint in here? Leo thought for a moment. Yes, he whispered. A few weeks ago. She said she was making it nice. She wore a mask. But she didn't give one to him. Just then, the door to the house opened. Brittany walked in. She was dressed now in yoga pants and a tight top, holding a green smoothie. She stopped at the edge of the garage, looking at the dust and the plastic sheeting with distaste. Is it going to be this loud all day? She asked, shouting over the sound of the fans. I have a Zoom call at 10. I stepped in front of the open wall, blocking her view of the mold. I didn't want her to know we found it yet. I wanted the lab report first. Construction is loud, Brittany, I said. She rolled her eyes. She looked at Leo, who was sitting behind the plastic sheet. Leo, she snapped. Why are you just sitting there? You look like a lazy lump. Grandpa said to stay here, Leo said, his voice shaking. Well, Grandpa isn't the boss of your chores, she said, walking over to him. I told you to sort the recycling. The bin is overflowing. She pointed to a blue bin filled with glass bottles and soda cans. Get up and do it, now. Leo struggled to get up. He didn't have his wheelchair near him. He had to drag his legs, pushing himself up on the mattress. His movement was slow and painful. As he tried to stand using the wall for support, his elbow knocked into a half-empty water bottle sitting on the floor. It tipped over. A small puddle of water spilled onto the concrete, maybe 3 ounces. Brittany froze. She stared at the water like it was acid. "Are you kidding me?" she screamed. She lunged forward, grabbing Leo by the shoulder of his sweatshirt and shaking him. "You clumsy little idiot," she yelled. "I just told you to be careful. You ruin everything. Look at this mess." "It is just water, Brittany," I said, stepping forward, but Mike put a hand on my chest, holding me back. "Let the camera roll," Mike whispered. "Let her dig the hole." Brittany didn't see the tiny lens on Mike's chest. She didn't see the red light on the GoPro mounted on the tool bench. She only saw a helpless boy and an audience of workmen she considered beneath her notice. She shoved Leo back onto the mattress. "You are useless," she spat, her face twisted into a mask of ugly hate. "You are a waste of space. You are a waste of food. You are a waste of the air you breathe. Do you know how much money we spend on you? Do you know what I could buy with the money we waste on your medicine?" Leo curled into a ball, covering his head with his hands, sobbing quietly. "I am sorry," he cried. "I am sorry, Brittany." "Shut up," she hissed. "Stop crying, you make me sick." She kicked the water bottle, sending it skittering across the floor. "Clean it up," she commanded, "with your sleeve, right now." Leo scrambled to wipe up the water using the expensive Carhartt jacket I had given him as a rag. Brittany stood over him, watching with satisfaction. "That is better," she said. "Now get to work on the recycling, and if I hear one bottle break, you are sleeping outside without the blanket tonight." She turned around, flipping her hair. She looked at me and Mike. "Sorry about that," she said, flashing a quick fake smile. "You have to be firm with him. He plays the victim if you let him." She walked back into the house, closing the door behind her. Silence descended on the garage. The workers had stopped hammering. They were all staring at the door, their faces pale with shock. Mike looked at me. He tapped his chest where the camera was. "I got it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I got every word. Waste of food. Waste of air." I walked over to Leo. I pulled him up from the floor. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "Grandpa." He sobbed. I spilled the water. "I am bad." I hugged him. I hugged him so tight I thought I might crush him. I buried my face in his neck, smelling the fear and the mold. "No, son," I whispered. "You are not bad. You are the only good thing in this house." I looked at the wall where the black mold was festering. I looked at the door where the monster lived. "Mike," I said. "Yeah, boss. Get the samples to the lab. Pay for the rush. I want the results by tonight." I looked down at my grandson. "And Mike." "Yeah. Call the hotel. Book the penthouse suite for tonight." "For who?" Mike asked. "For me," I said. "And for the boy." "But you said we couldn't take him," Mike whispered. "Not yet." I looked at the black mold. "Plans change," I said. "I am not leaving him in a gas chamber for another night. We take him tonight. But first we finish the show. I need you to find the wheelchair, Mike. Find out what she did with the battery." Mike nodded. "We are on it." I sat down on the mattress next to Leo. I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to sit right here and breathe this poison air with him until I could carry him out into the sun. And Brittany was going to drown. She just didn't know the water was rising yet. The dust from the drywall demolition was still settling in the cold air of the garage when Vance called me over to the far corner. He was standing next to a pile of what looked like discarded camping gear and broken garden tools. He had lifted a heavy canvas tarp, revealing something that made my stomach turn. It was Leo's electric wheelchair. I had bought this chair for him 3 years ago. It was a Quantum Edge top-of-the-line with tilt-in-space functions and off-road tires. It cost me $12,000. It was supposed to be his freedom. It was supposed to be the legs he lost on that rainy highway in Detroit. Now it was sitting there covered in a thick layer of dust and spiderwebs, looking like a piece of junk in a scrapyard. Vance pointed at the back of the chair. "Look at the battery housing, Winston," he said, his voice low. I leaned in. The compartment was empty. The heavy-duty lithium-ion battery pack was gone. The charging port was covered in grime. "It is dead," Vance said. "It is a 300-pound paperweight." I looked over at Leo. He was still sitting on his mattress behind the plastic barrier trying to clean his fingernails with a piece of scrap wood. Beside him was the manual wheelchair. It was an old hospital loaner, the kind with the heavy steel frame and the hard rubber tires that feel every pebble on the ground. It was meant for temporary transport down a hallway, not for daily life. I walked over to my grandson. "Leo," I said, kneeling down, "let me see your hands." Leo flinched. He hid his hands inside the sleeves of his oversized sweatshirt. "They are fine, Grandpa," he whispered. "I washed them." "Show me, son," I insisted gently. Slowly, reluctantly, he pulled his hands out. I gasped. His palms were a wreck. They were covered in blisters. Some were fresh and filled with fluid, others had popped and were weeping raw red skin. Calluses had formed and torn open again. His knuckles were swollen and bruised. These were not the hands of a 15-year-old boy who loved video games and drawing. These were the hands of a bricklayer. These were the hands of a man who had been doing hard labor for years. "My God, Leo," I breathed, taking his hands in mine, careful not to touch the raw spots. "Does Brittany see this?" Leo nodded, looking at the floor. "She says I have soft hands," he said, his voice barely audible. "She says I need to build calluses. She says men don't complain about work." "Work?" I asked. "Just getting from the bathroom to the garage is work in that manual chair." I stood up. I felt a shaking in my legs that wasn't from age. It was from the desire to destroy. Vance walked up behind me. He handed me his tablet. I ran the serial number of the chair, he said, and then I ran a search on local eBay listings from this zip code. He tapped the screen. There it was. Listing ended 30 days ago. Seller BritBabe 85. Item quantum wheelchair, battery pack, and fast charger, like new. Sold for $800. She sold it. She didn't lose it. It didn't break. She ripped the heart out of my grandson's legs and sold it to a stranger on the internet for $800. And the date I asked, staring at the screen. October 12th, Vance said. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through Brittany's Instagram feed. I found the post from October 14th. It was a selfie. She was wearing a glittery top and holding a VIP lanyard. The caption read, "Beyoncé Renaissance Tour." Sometimes mama needs a break to recharge her soul. #QueenBay #self-care. She sold his battery to buy a ticket to a concert. She took his ability to move freely to turn himself in bed to relieve the pressure on his sores, and she traded it for 3 hours of music and a margarita. I looked at the garage door leading to the house. I could hear muffled voices. I walked over and cracked the door just an inch. Brittany was outside on the driveway talking to a woman I recognized as Mrs. Gable, the neighborhood busybody. They were standing near the open garage door where the construction noise was spilling out. "Oh, it is a nightmare," Brittany was saying, laughing lightly. "Winston decided to do this renovation out of the blue. I told him we didn't need it, but you know how men are. They love to fix things that aren't broken." Mrs. Gable nodded, looking at the construction vans. "And how is Leo doing?" Mrs. Gable asked. "I saw him outside the other day in that old wheelchair. He looked like he was struggling, dear. He was sweating so much just trying to get up the driveway." I held my breath, waiting for the lie. Brittany sighed, a sound of practiced martyrdom. "I know," she said, lowering her voice to a confidential whisper. "It is heartbreaking to watch, isn't it? But we have to be cruel to be kind." Mrs. Gable looked confused. "What do you mean?" "His muscles are atrophying," Brittany explained. "Since he got the electric chair, he got lazy. He stopped using his upper body. Dr. Evans said if we don't force him to use the manual chair, his arms will waste away too. We are doing a boot camp. It is for his own good." She paused, looking back at the house. "He cries about it, of course," she added. "He says his hands hurt. But I told him pain is just weakness leaving the body. I am trying to raise a man, Mrs. Gable, not an invalid. If he wants to be independent, he has to earn it. Earn it." I closed the door. I leaned my forehead against the cold wood. She was selling his pain as parenting. She was framing her theft as therapy. She had stripped him of his dignity, sold it for concert tickets, and then convinced the neighborhood that she was a saint for watching him suffer. I walked back to Leo. Vance was already there, applying some antibiotic ointment from the first aid kit to Leo's hands. Leo was wincing, but he didn't pull away. Grandpa, Leo asked, looking up at me. "Is the battery really broken?" Brittany said it exploded. She said I overcharged it and ruined it. I knelt down. I looked him in the eye. No, Leo, I said firmly. You didn't ruin anything. The battery didn't explode. It was stolen. Stolen, he gasped. By robbers. Yes, I said, by a robber. But don't you worry, we found the thief. I stood up. Mike, I called out. Yeah, boss. Do we have a spare battery in the van, I asked, knowing full well we didn't carry medical equipment. No, Mike said, but I can have one here in an hour. I know a supplier downtown. Get it, I said, and get the heavy-duty one, the one that lasts for 20 miles. I looked at Brittany's Instagram post again on my phone. The smiling face, the hashtag self-care. You enjoyed the concert, Brittany, I thought. I hope you danced. I hope you jumped up and down, because you are going to need those legs. When I am done with you, you won't be able to afford a car. You won't be able to afford an Uber. You will be walking everywhere. And every time your feet hurt, every time you get a blister, I want you to remember the boy you forced to drag himself across concrete so you could hear a song. I put my hand on Leo's shoulder. Rest your hands, son, I said. The manual labor is over. Leo looked at his bandaged hands. But the chores, he whispered. The recycling. Forget the recycling, I said. Today we are taking out the trash. And I meant it. The biggest piece of trash in this house wasn't in the blue bin. She was standing in the driveway wearing yoga pants and lying to the neighbors. Vance handed me a folder. Here is the eBay receipt, Winston, he said, and the PayPal transaction record linking it to her personal account. It is undeniable. I took the folder. I added it to the pile, the mold report, the bank statements, and now the battery. The case was building. It was a fortress of evidence. But I wasn't done. I needed one more thing. I needed the world to see it. I didn't just want to win in court. A court case is quiet. A court case is sealed records and plea deals. I wanted noise. I wanted shame. I wanted her to walk into a grocery store 5 years from now and have people whisper, "There goes the woman who sold a crippled boy's legs." I looked at Mike. "Is the projector ready?" I asked. "Ready and waiting," Mike said. "Good," I said, "because tonight we are going to a party, and I am bringing the entertainment. The balloon arch over the front door cost $400. I know this because I saw the invoice on the kitchen counter while my guys were tearing down the garage wall. It was a spiral of pastel pink and gold latex, a towering monument to vanity that screamed, "Look at me." The driveway was packed with luxury SUVs, Range Rovers, Escalades, Teslas. It looked like a dealership for people who had more credit debt than sense. It was Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining with a mocking brightness, warming the manicured lawns of the neighborhood, while my grandson sat in a construction zone breathing drywall dust. Today was not just my granddaughter Kaylee's 8th birthday. That was the cover story. The real event was the coronation of Brittany Carter. She had been nominated for the Atlanta Mom and Baby Influencer of the Year award by a local lifestyle magazine. The party was sponsored. There were logos on the napkins. There were gift bags for the guests filled with organic skin cream and discount codes for meal prep services. I parked my truck 2 blocks away. I didn't want my rusted Ford ruining the aesthetic of her driveway. I walked up the street carrying a garment bag over my shoulder. Inside was my tuxedo, not a rental. A bespoke suit cut by a tailor on Savile Row in London 10 years ago when I sold my company. I hadn't worn it since my wife's funeral. Today I was wearing it to a different kind of funeral. The funeral of Brittany's reputation. I slipped into the garage through the side door. The air inside was thick with dust despite the fans Mike had set up. The demolition was halfway done. The studs were exposed, revealing the rot and the secrets of this house. Leo was sitting behind the plastic barrier. He was wearing noise-canceling headphones I had bought him that morning to block out the party music thumping through the walls. He was reading a comic book. He looked small. He looked forgotten. "Hey, spy," I whispered, tapping on the plastic. Leo looked up. He pulled off the headphones. His face lit up when he saw me. "Grandpa," he said, "is the party over?" "No, son," I said, kneeling down on the dusty concrete. "It is just starting." Leo looked down at his lap. Brittany said I have to stay here until the last car leaves," he said quietly. "She said there are important people here. Sponsors. She said a boy in a wheelchair makes people feel sad, and she doesn't want to bring down the vibe." The vibe. She was worried about the vibe while she committed human rights violations in her own home. I looked at the door leading to the kitchen. I could hear laughter. I could hear the clink of champagne glasses. "Are you hungry, Leo?" I asked. "I am okay," he said. "Dad brought me a sandwich earlier. It had ham. One sandwich. While inside, they were serving catered hors d'oeuvres." I reached into my bag and pulled out a protein bar. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Eat this," I said, and put the headphones back on. "I don't want you to hear what happens next." "Why?" Leo asked, his eyes wide. "What is going to happen?" "Justice, son," I said. "Justice is going to happen." I stood up and walked to the door. I cracked it open just enough to see into the kitchen. The house was transformed. Fresh flowers were on every surface. A bartender was mixing pink cocktails in the corner. The room was filled with women who looked exactly like Brittany. High heels, blowouts, whitened teeth. They were a clone army of suburban perfection, and there in the center of it, holding court, was Brittany. She was wearing a pale pink dress that matched the balloons. She looked radiant. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a hand on her chest as she spoke to a woman holding a microphone. "Oh, stop it," Brittany gushed. "I am not a hero. I am just a mom doing her best." Raising a blended family has its challenges, especially with a special needs child, but love conquers all. We don't see disability in this house. We just see possibility. The woman with the microphone nodded solemnly. The cameraman behind her zoomed in. "That is so inspiring," the interviewer said. "And where is Leo today? We would love to meet the boy who inspired your journey." I held my breath. Brittany's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Just a glitch in the matrix. Then it was back, dazzling and practiced. "Oh, Leo is at a specialized retreat this weekend," she lied smoothly. "It is a sensory immersion camp in the mountains. He loves it there. They have horses and hydrotherapy. We really wanted him here for his sister's birthday, but we couldn't interrupt his treatment. Consistency is key for his condition." A retreat. He was 20 feet away, sitting next to a table saw. The crowd murmured their approval. "You are such a good mother," someone whispered. "Most people would send him to a home," another said. I watched Damon. My son was standing by the sliding glass door holding a tray of empty glasses. He looked like a ghost. He heard the lie. He knew the truth. But he said nothing. He just stared at the floor, his spine dissolved by years of cowardice. I closed the door. I couldn't watch anymore. If I stayed, I would vomit. I walked back to Leo. "I have to go get changed," I said. "Are you going to the party?" Grandpa Leo asked. "Yes," I said. "I have a speech to give." I walked out of the garage and back to my truck. I drove to the gas station around the corner. I went into the bathroom, I washed the dust off my face, I shaved, I put on the tuxedo, I tied the bow tie with steady hands. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see Winston the mechanic. I didn't see Winston the grandfather. I saw Winston Carter, the CEO. The man who had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts with unions and city councils. The man who could walk into a boardroom and silence it with a look. I walked out to my truck, but I didn't get in the truck. I pulled out my phone and called a number. "Bring it around," I said. 5 minutes later, a black trailer pulled up driven by one of my old employees. He lowered the ramp. I backed my pride and joy out of the trailer. It was a Mercedes Maybach S650, two-tone black and silver V12 engine. It was a car that cost more than Brittany's house. I rarely drove it. It was ostentatious. It was loud. But today loud was exactly what I needed. I slipped into the driver's seat. The leather smelled like success. I drove back to the house. I didn't park down the street this time. I turned into the driveway. I honked the horn. A deep, resonant blast that cut through the chatter of the party. I drove right up onto the lawn, crushing the perfect grass, avoiding the sprinkler heads by memory. I pulled up right to the front porch, blocking the entrance. I stepped out. The guests on the porch stopped talking. They stared at the car. They stared at the old black man in the tuxedo standing next to it. I adjusted my cuffs. I walked up the steps. The door was open. I walked into the foyer. The conversation in the living room died down. The music seemed to fade. Brittany turned around, annoyance flashing on her face at the intrusion. "Excuse me," she started to say, "this is a private..." Then she saw me. She saw the tuxedo. She saw the shoes that cost $1,000. She saw the look in my eyes. "Winston," she whispered. I didn't stop. I walked straight to the bartender. "Whiskey," I said. "Neat." The bartender poured it, his hand shaking slightly. I took the glass. I turned to the room. There were about 50 people there. The cream of the crop of Atlanta's social climbers, the sponsors, the neighbors, the media. I saw the woman with the microphone. I saw the red light of the camera. Perfect. I walked over to the DJ booth. I tapped the DJ on the shoulder. "Cut the music, son," I said. The DJ looked at Brittany. Brittany looked frozen. "Do it," I commanded. The music stopped. Silence fell over the room. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a saw from the garage. I turned to face the crowd. I raised my glass. "Good afternoon, everyone," I boomed, my voice projecting to the rafters. Brittany stepped forward, her smile tight and panic-stricken. "Dad," she said, her voice high and strained. "What are you doing? You look nice." "But we are in the middle of a presentation." "I know," I said, smiling at her. A wolf smiling at a lamb. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. After all, it is not every day my daughter-in-law gets nominated for a sainthood." The crowd chuckled nervously. They sensed the tension, but they didn't understand the source. I looked at the representative from the magazine. "You are giving her an award for Mother of the Year, is that right?" I asked. The woman nodded hesitantly. "Yes. For her dedication to special needs advocacy." "Advocacy," I repeated, tasting the word. Beautiful word. I took a sip of whiskey. "I have a gift," I said. I gestured to the projector screen that had been set up to show a slideshow of Kaylee's birthday photos. "Brittany," I said, "I know you love content. I know you love showing the world your reality. So I made a little movie for you." Brittany's eyes darted to the laptop connected to the projector. "No," she said quickly. "We have a schedule, maybe later." "Now," I said. I pulled a remote from my pocket. It wasn't the projector remote. It was a signal to Mike, who was hiding in the kitchen pantry with his own laptop hacked into the system. I pressed the button. The picture of Kaylee blowing out candles disappeared. The screen went black for a second. Then a timestamp appeared. Yesterday. 6:42 a.m. The video began to play. It was grainy footage from a hidden camera, but the audio was crystal clear, and the first thing the room heard was the sound of a woman screaming, "You are a waste of space, Leo. A waste of food." The room gasped. I looked at Brittany. "Happy birthday," I whispered. "The show has begun." The sound of a V12 engine is distinct. It does not roar like a muscle car, and it does not whine like a sports car. It hums. It is a deep, resonant frequency that vibrates in your chest before you even see the vehicle. It is the sound of power. It is the sound of authority. And as I turned the corner onto the street where my son lived, that hum was the only announcement I needed. I was driving a Mercedes Maybach S650, two-tone paint, obsidian black on top, iridium silver on the bottom. I had bought it cash 3 years ago as a retirement gift to myself, but it mostly sat under a tarp in my climate-controlled storage unit in Detroit. I usually drove my truck because I like to blend in. I like to be underestimated. But today I did not want to blend in. Today I wanted to stand out like a diamond in a coal mine. I rolled down the window as I approached the driveway. The valet, a teenager in a red vest who looked bored out of his mind, dropped his jaw. He was leaning against a Range Rover, probably thinking that was the height of luxury. He had never seen a car like this, not in person. I didn't wait for him to open the door. I pulled the car right up to the front steps, crushing a few of Brittany's prize-winning hydrangeas with my tires. I put it in park. I stepped out. I adjusted my cufflinks. They were gold vintage Cartier. I smoothed the lapels of my tuxedo. It was midnight blue, almost black, cut to fit my broad shoulders perfectly. I put on my sunglasses even though the sun was starting to dip. I walked up the steps. The valet ran up to me breathless. "Sir," he stammered, holding out his hand for the keys. "Do you want a ticket?" I looked at him over the rim of my glasses. "Keep it running, son," I said, flipping him a $100 bill. "I won't be staying long." I walked through the open front door. The transition from the quiet of the car to the noise of the party was jarring. The house was packed. The air smelled of expensive perfume, catering trays, and ambition. People were laughing that polite, high-pitched laughter that signals social climbing. I saw women in cocktail dresses holding champagne flutes, scanning the room to see who was watching them. I saw men in blazers talking about golf and interest rates. I stood in the foyer for a moment, just watching. Nobody noticed me yet. They were too busy looking at each other. Then I saw her. Brittany. She was in the center of the living room, standing under the crystal chandelier. She was holding court. She had a glass of rosé in one hand, and she was gesturing expansively with the other. She looked like the queen of the suburbs. She was glowing, and why wouldn't she be? She had successfully hidden her stepson in a garage filled with toxic mold. She had successfully fooled the magazine editors. She had successfully spent my money on a pool that was currently curing in the backyard. She was winning. I started to walk toward her. The tap of my dress shoes on the hardwood floor was sharp and deliberate. A woman near the entrance turned and saw me. She nudged her husband. He turned. The ripple effect began. Silence spread through the room like a wave. The chatter died down. The music seemed to fade into the background. Brittany sensed the shift in the room. She turned around, a smile frozen on her face, ready to greet another admirer. When she saw me, the smile didn't just drop, it evaporated. She blinked. She looked at the tuxedo. She looked at the shoes. She looked at the man she had dismissed as a senile old mechanic just yesterday. "Winston," she whispered. I walked right up to her. I didn't stop until I was inside her personal space. "Brittany," I said, my voice smooth and rich. "You look expensive." She stared at me. She was trying to process what she was seeing. This wasn't the man in the flannel shirt. This wasn't the man begging to see his grandson. This was a man who looked like he owned the bank that held her mortgage. "Winston," she stammered, her eyes darting to the guests who were now watching us with intense curiosity. "I thought you said you were running errands." I said, flashing a charming smile to the room, "but I couldn't miss the big day. Influencer of the year, right? That is a big deal." Brittany relaxed slightly. She saw the smile. She saw the tuxedo. Her brain made a quick calculation. "He is dressed up. He is happy. He is here to support me. He is here to pay for the renovation." She let out a breath and put the mask back on. "Oh, Winston," she gushed, reaching out to touch my arm. "You cleaned up nice. I didn't know you even owned a suit like that." "I have a lot of things you don't know about Brittany," I said. She laughed nervously. "Well, I am glad you are here. We were just talking about the journey, about how hard it has been." "I bet," I said. I looked around the room. I saw Damon standing by the bar. He looked terrified. He knew me better than she did. He knew that when Winston Carter put on a tuxedo on a Saturday afternoon, it wasn't for a party. It was for an execution. He started to walk toward us, shaking his head slightly, begging me with his eyes to stop. But I ignored him. I looked at the woman holding the microphone, the reporter from the magazine. "Is this the interview?" I asked. "Yes," the reporter said, dazzled by the suit. "We are just wrapping up. You must be the grandfather." "I am," I said. "The patriarch." I looked at Brittany. "I have a gift," I said. Brittany's eyes lit up. A gift. She thought it was the check. She thought I was going to hand her a piece of paper that would pay for her garage conversion and maybe cover her credit card debt. "Oh, Dad," she said, her voice dropping into that sweet, sugary register she used for the camera. "You didn't have to get me anything. Your presence is enough." "Nonsense," I said. "You have done so much. You have sacrificed so much. You took in a disabled boy. You gave him a home. You gave him structure." I emphasized the word structure. Brittany nodded, beaming. "It is a labor of love," she said to the camera. "I think everyone should know just how much you have done," I said. I reached out and took the microphone from the reporter's hand. I didn't ask. I just took it. It was a natural movement. The movement of a man used to being in charge. The reporter didn't object. She stepped back, sensing that something important was about to happen. I turned to the room. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" I boomed. The few people still whispering fell silent. The room was focused entirely on me. Brittany stood next to me, posing. She hooked her arm through mine, playing the part of the beloved daughter-in-law. She was practically vibrating with anticipation. She was ready for the praise. She was ready for the applause. "My name is Winston Carter," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the speakers, "and I am the man who bought this house." A few people clapped politely. "I bought this house because I wanted my family to be safe," I continued. "I wanted my grandson Leo to have a sanctuary. And for the last 5 years I have watched from a distance as my daughter-in-law Brittany turned this house into a home." I looked down at her. She smiled up at me adoringly. "She is a woman of vision," I said. "She knows exactly what she wants. She wants perfection. She wants beauty. And she will stop at nothing to get it." Brittany nodded, agreeing with every word, thinking it was a compliment. "She has taught me a lot," I said. "She taught me that appearances are everything. She taught me that it doesn't matter what is happening on the inside, as long as the paint is fresh and the photos are edited." A few guests exchanged confused glances. The tone was shifting, but Brittany didn't catch it yet. She was too drunk on her own ego. "And today," I said, raising my voice slightly, "today she is being honored. Influencer of the Year. A title for someone who influences others. Someone who sets an example. I put my hand in my pocket. I felt the remote control. Brittany leaned into the microphone. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "That is so sweet." "Wait," I said. "I am not done." I pulled my hand out of my pocket. I wasn't holding a check. I was holding the small black remote. Brittany looked at it. Confusion flickered in her eyes. "What is that?" she asked. "I heard you like content." "Brittany," I said, my voice dropping to a low growl, "I heard you like to document your life. So I thought I would help you out. I hired a film crew." "A film crew?" she asked, looking around. "Yes," I said, "to capture the real you. The you that the camera doesn't usually see. The you that exists when the ring light is off." I stepped away from her, breaking her hold on my arm. I walked toward the large projection screen that had been set up for her slideshow. "I have a special gift for my daughter-in-law," I announced to the room. "A woman who has sacrificed everything, including her soul." Brittany's smile vanished. The color drained from her face. She looked at Damon. Damon was shaking his head, mouthing, "No, don't do it." But it was too late. The train had left the station. I pointed the remote at the screen. "You wanted to be famous, Brittany," I said. I pressed the button. "Let's make you famous." The projector hummed to life overhead, a low mechanical whir that sounded like a plane engine preparing for takeoff. The white screen descended slowly, covering the view of the backyard, covering the view of the pool that was being built with stolen money, covering the lies with a blank canvas waiting for the truth. The room dimmed automatically as the smart blinds lowered. Brittany had programmed them that way for her presentation. She had set the stage for her own execution. I stood to the side of the screen, my tuxedo absorbing the shadows, my face impassive. I watched the guests. They were holding their breath, expecting a montage of baby photos set to acoustic guitar music. They were expecting to cry happy tears. They were expecting to see the carefully curated version of the Carter family that Brittany broadcast to the world. Instead, they saw static. Then the image resolved. It was stark. It was high definition thanks to the cameras Mike had installed in the studs. The timestamp in the corner read October 24th, 11:42 p.m. 2 nights ago. The angle was wide, capturing the entire corner of the garage. The lighting was harsh, coming from the single fluorescent strip overhead. It cast long, sharp shadows against the unfinished drywall and the plastic sheeting. There was no music. There was only the sound of the garage, the hum of the refrigerator in the corner, the wind rattling the metal door, and the sound of breathing. In the center of the frame, on the dirty mattress, lay Leo. A gasp rippled through the room. It wasn't a happy gasp. It was the sound of air being sucked out of 50 pairs of lungs at once. On the screen, Leo was shaking. It wasn't a subtle shiver. His entire body was vibrating under the thin blankets. He was curled into a ball, his knees pulled up to his chest, his hands tucked under his armpits. He looked like a refugee. He looked like a prisoner of war. Then the coughing started. It was a wet, hacking sound that tore through the silence of the ballroom. On the screen, Leo sat up. He grabbed a rag from the floor, the same rag he used to clean the lawnmower. He coughed into it. His small body convulsed with the effort. When he pulled the rag away, he held it up to the light. Even in the video, you could see the dark stain. Blood. My grandson was coughing up blood in a freezing garage while his stepmother slept in silk sheets upstairs. I looked at the guests. The woman from the magazine had covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the screen. The bartender had stopped wiping a glass. The DJ was staring with his mouth open. But the video wasn't done. The timestamp jumped forward. October 25th, 7:00 a.m. The garage door leading to the house flew open on the screen. Brittany walked in. She wasn't wearing her pink party dress. She was wearing her bathrobe. She was holding a plastic tray like the kind used in a cafeteria. On the screen, she didn't look like the mom of the year. Her face was twisted in a snarl. She marched over to the mattress where Leo was trying to sit up. "Here," she said. Her voice boomed through the speakers, clear and sharp. "Eat fast. I need the tray back." She didn't hand it to him. She didn't place it on a table because there was no table. She dropped it. She let go of the tray from waist height. It hit the concrete floor with a loud clatter. The plastic bowl tipped over. The The gray oatmeal spilled out onto the dirty floor right next to the oil stains. The glass of water shattered, sending shards of glass skittering across the mattress. Leo flinched, scrambling backward against the wall. "Look what you did," the video, Brittany screamed. "You clumsy idiot, you waste of space." On screen, Leo started to cry. "I didn't do it," he sobbed. "You dropped it, Brittany. Don't you lie to me," she yelled. She stepped forward and kicked the spilled oatmeal. "You did this on purpose. You are ungrateful. I cook for you, I clean for you, and this is how you repay me." She pointed at the mess on the floor. "Clean it up," she commanded. Leo reached for the rag. "No," she said. "Not with the rag. Eat it." The room went dead silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like gravity has doubled. What Leo whispered on the screen. "You heard me," Brittany hissed, looming over him. "Food is expensive. We don't waste food in this house. If you want to act like an animal, you can eat like one. Pick it up and eat it." On the screen, my grandson, the boy I had taught to fish. The boy who loved comic books, reached out with a trembling hand. He picked up a glob of oatmeal from the concrete floor. He hesitated, looking up at her, hoping for mercy. There was no mercy. "Eat it!" she screamed. He put it in his mouth. I paused the video. The image froze on that moment. Brittany standing over him like a tyrant, Leo with dirt and oatmeal on his face, his eyes shut tight in humiliation. I stood there in the silence, letting the image burn into their retinas. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted the sponsors who gave her free strollers and the neighbors who liked her post to see exactly who they were applauding. Then the sound of glass breaking shattered the silence. Someone near the back had dropped their champagne flute. It hit the floor and exploded, but nobody moved to clean it up. They were paralyzed. I looked at the woman from the magazine, the one who was going to give her the award. Her face was gray. She looked like she was going to be sick. She slowly took the sash that said Mom of the Year off the table. She folded it. She put it in her bag. Then she stood up. "I am leaving," she said. Her voice was shaking. "Wait!" Brittany cried out. Her voice broke the spell. Brittany rushed forward from where she had been standing, frozen near the fireplace. She waved her hands frantically, trying to block the projector beam with her body. Her shadow fell across the screen, but it couldn't hide the truth. "Wait, please," she screamed. "Don't go! This is a mistake." The magazine representative didn't stop. She signaled to her cameraman. "Cut the feed," she said. "We are done here." Brittany grabbed the woman's arm. "You don't understand," she pleaded, her eyes wild. "That is not real. That is not me." She spun around, pointing a finger at me. "He did this," she shrieked. "He hates me. He has always hated me because I am white. He is jealous that I am raising his grandson better than his daughter ever could." She looked around the room, begging for allies. "It is AI," she yelled. "Artificial intelligence. You know what they can do now? They can make deep fakes. He hired someone to make this. He took my voice from my videos and he put it on an actor." That is not Leo. That is a computer trick. She was desperate. She was throwing every buzzword she could think of at the wall, hoping something would stick. I stood perfectly still. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I just watched her unravel. "It is a deep fake," she repeated, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Look at the shadows. Look at the pixels. It is fake. I love Leo. I would never do that. I am a holistic mother. I am an advocate." She ran to Damon, who was standing by the bar looking like he had been struck by lightning. "Damon, tell them," she begged, shaking him. "Tell them I treat him like a king. Tell them about the organic food. Tell them about the sensory retreat." Damon looked at the screen. He looked at the image of his wife standing over his son, forcing him to eat off the floor. He looked at me. And for the first time in his life, I saw something in Damon's eyes that wasn't fear. It was horror. He pulled his arm away from her. Damon, Brittany gasped. "Why aren't you saying anything?" "Because he knows," I said, my voice cutting through her panic. I walked to the center of the room. "He knows because he bought the oatmeal," I said. "He knows because he paid the electric bill for the garage. He knows because deep down he has known for years that you are a monster, and he was too much of a coward to stop you." I turned to the guests. "I didn't sell his wheelchair battery on eBay," I said, holding up the receipt Vance had given me. "I didn't spend $45,000 of his surgery money to build a pool in the backyard. I didn't isolate a 15-year-old boy until he wished he was dead. I looked at the neighbors. You saw him, I said. You saw him dragging himself up the driveway. You saw his hands bleeding, and you bought her story about boot camp. You let her convince you that torture was therapy. The neighbors looked down. Shame is a powerful thing. It filled the room thick and suffocating. This is a setup, Brittany screamed, backing away. You are framing me. I will sue you. I will sue all of you. I clicked the remote one more time. The screen changed. It wasn't a video this time. It was a live feed. The camera was positioned inside the garage right now. At this very moment, it showed the plastic barrier. It showed the mattress. And it showed Leo sitting there wearing his noise-canceling headphones, reading his comic book, oblivious to the chaos inside. He looked up at the camera and waved. And next to him, sitting on a bucket, was Mike, my foreman, holding today's newspaper. I pointed at the screen. Is that AI, Brittany? I asked. Is that a deep fake? Or is that my grandson sitting exactly where you left him 10 minutes ago so he wouldn't ruin your aesthetic? Brittany stared at the live feed. There was no denying it. It was real time. She made a sound like a wounded animal, a low, keening wail that rose from her chest. Get out, she screamed. Everybody get out. This is my house. You are trespassing. She grabbed a vase of flowers from the table and threw it. It smashed against the wall, water and petals spraying everywhere. I said, get out. The guests didn't need to be told twice. They were already moving toward the door, clutching their purses, leaving their gift bags behind. The sponsor from the baby food company was practically running, but I didn't move, and neither did the police officers who had just walked through the front door, silently ushered in by Vance. Brittany saw the uniforms. She froze. No, she whispered. I walked up to her. I leaned in close so only she could hear me. You wanted a viral moment, Brittany, I said. I pointed to the open door where the red and blue lights of the cruiser were flashing against the pink balloons. You are trending, I said. Look at the camera and smile. The silence in the room was heavier than the humid Atlanta air outside. The video feed had cut to black, but the image of my grandson eating oatmeal off the concrete floor was burned into the retinas of every socialite and sponsor in the room. They looked at Brittany differently now. 5 minutes ago, she was a glowing Earth Mother in pink silk. Now they saw the dirt under her fingernails. They saw the cruelty behind the smile. But shame is a fleeing emotion. I knew people like Brittany. She was already recovering. I could see the gears turning behind her panic-stricken eyes. She was formulating a defense. She was going to claim the video was taken out of context. She was going to claim it was tough love. She was going to claim it was a one-time mistake, born of stress. I wasn't going to give her that chance. I wasn't going to let her spin this. I needed to nail the coffin shut so tight that not even a prayer could get her out. I walked over to the buffet table. I shoved a tray of artisan cheese aside, sending crackers spilling onto the floor. I reached into my inside jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, heavy envelope. It wasn't the festive greeting card kind. It was manila, it was official, and it was filled with the paper trail of her destruction. I raised the envelope high so everyone could see it. You say you love him, I said, my voice booming in the quiet room. You say you sacrifice for him. You say his health is your priority. I threw the envelope onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud that made the crystal glasses jump. Open it, Brittany, I commanded. Brittany stared at the envelope. She backed away, shaking her head. I won't, she whispered. I don't know what that is. I will tell you what it is, I said, stepping closer to the crowd. I picked up the top document. It was stamped with the logo of the urgent care lab Mike had rushed the samples to that morning. This is a pathology report, I announced, scanning the room. My crew found black mold growing behind the drywall in the garage, Stachybotrys chartarum. It is highly toxic. It causes bleeding in the lungs. It causes cognitive failure. It attacks the immune system. I looked at the guests. My grandson has been sleeping 6 inches away from it for 3 weeks. I turned on Brittany. And here's the kicker, I said. You knew. No, she screamed. I didn't know. How could I know? Because you painted over it, I roared. I pulled out the photo Mike had taken. The close-up of the white Kills primer smeared over the black rot. You bought a gallon of primer on October 1st, I said. I have the receipt from Home Depot right here. You saw the mold. You smelled the rot. And instead of calling a professional, instead of moving the boy inside, you painted over it to hide the color. You sealed him in a gas chamber, and you called it a bedroom. The crowd gasped. A woman in the front row looked at her own child, clutching him tight. He is coughing up blood. Brittany, I said, my voice dropping to a growl. That is not a cold. That is poisoning. You poisoned him. Brittany was hyperventilating now. Her chest was heaving. It was just a little mildew, she stammered. I treated it with essential oils. I used tea tree oil. It is natural. Tea tree oil doesn't kill black mold, I snapped, and it certainly doesn't fix a collapsed lung. I slammed the medical report down and picked up the next stack of papers. The bank statements. The ones Mr. Henderson had printed for me with shaking hands. But maybe you were just ignorant, I said. Maybe you are just a bad homeowner. But this isn't ignorance. This is theft. I held up the statements. The pages were highlighted in neon yellow marker. This is the Leo Carter Special Needs Trust, I said. A fund I set up to pay for his surgeries, to pay for the tendon release operation that would allow him to stand up, to allow him to look a man in the eye. I walked toward her. She retreated until her back hit the grand piano. There was $300,000 in this account 5 years ago, I said. I looked at the final page. Today, there is $12.50. The room erupted in whispers, shocked, angry whispers. Where did it go, Brittany? I asked. Did it go to doctors? Did it go to therapy? Did it go to a new wheelchair? I pointed my cane at her, specifically at the crook of her arm. She was clutching a handbag, a small beige leather bag with gold hardware. I knew exactly what it was because I had seen the transaction on page 14. That is a nice bag, I said. Hermes Birkin, isn't it? The 25-centimeter in chai leather. Brittany clutched the bag tighter, trying to hide it behind her back. It was a gift, she lied. A gift from a sponsor. No, it wasn't, I said. You bought it at the boutique in Buckhead 3 weeks ago. You paid $18,000 for it, and you paid with a debit card linked to Leo's trust. I turned to the audience. She is holding my grandson's legs on her arm, I shouted. She is carrying his ability to walk in a leather sack meant for lipstick and lies. I grabbed the next sheet, and the shoes I asked, pointing at her feet. Louboutin, $1,200, paid for by the trust. And the pool, I yelled, pointing toward the window. The $80,000 hole in the ground you are digging, paid for by the money meant to fix his spine. You stripped him for parts, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You looked at a crippled boy, and you didn't see a son. You saw an ATM. You saw a piggy bank you could break open whenever you wanted a new toy. Brittany was sobbing now. Ugly mascara-stained tears streaming down her face. I needed it, she wailed. You don't understand the pressure I have to look a certain way. I am a brand. If I don't look successful, nobody will follow me. I did it for the family. I was investing in our future. Investing, I scoffed. You were investing in vanity. Damon stepped forward then. My son, the ghost in the machine. He had been standing by the bar watching the destruction of his life with a slack jaw. But now, seeing his wife cornered, seeing the police at the door, seeing the guests looking at them like they were lepers, something in him snapped. But it wasn't the snap of a man finding his backbone. It was the snap of a coward trying to save face. He rushed toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Dad, stop, he pleaded, his voice high and thin. Please, that is enough. He tried to grab the papers from my hand. You are making a scene, Dad, he hissed. These people are our friends. This is private business. We can explain everything. The money, we were going to pay it back. It was a loan, just a bridge loan until Brittany's sponsorship money came through. A loan, I asked, staring at him. You loaned yourself his surgery money to buy a purse. Damon looked around nervously. Keep it down, he whispered. We are family. You don't air dirty laundry in public. You are ruining us, Dad. Think about the kids. Think about Kyle and Kaylee. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had raised. I looked at the boy I had taught to throw a baseball. The boy I had taught to hold a door open. The boy I had taught that a man protects those who cannot protect themselves. And I saw nothing. I saw a stranger. I saw a hollow shell filled with fear and complicity. He wasn't a victim. He was the getaway driver. He knew. He watched her spend the money. He watched her put Leo in the garage. And he did nothing because he liked the heated floors and the easy life. Family, I asked quietly. Yes, family. Damon insisted, gaining a little confidence, thinking he could talk me down. We settle this inside. Just tell the police to leave. Tell the guests it was a misunderstanding. Please, Dad. For me. He reached out and put a hand on my shoulder, a familiar gesture, a son asking a father for a bailout. I looked at his hand. It felt heavy. It felt like a chain. I didn't think. I reacted with the instinct of a patriarch whose line has been corrupted. I raised my hand, my heavy, calloused hand, and I struck him. It wasn't a punch, it was a slap. But it was a slap with 73 years of disappointment behind it. Crack. The sound was louder than the glass breaking earlier. It was the sound of a bond breaking. Damon stumbled back, clutching his cheek. He looked at me with shock. I had never hit him in his life, not once. Dad, he whimpered. Don't you call me that, I roared. I took a step toward him, forcing him back. You are not my son, I spat. My son died the day he let his wife put his nephew in a garage next to a bag of fertilizer. My son died the day he watched a woman steal from a disabled child and said nothing because he wanted a new pool. I pointed at Leo's face on the frozen screen. That is my blood, I said. That boy on the floor. That is the only Carter in this house. You Damon, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. You are just the man who opened the door for the thief. You stood there and watched him freeze, I said. You ate pancakes while he ate sludge. You are worse than her. She is a predator. That is her nature. But you were supposed to be his father. I looked at the guests. I looked at the police. I turned back to Damon. I don't have a son, I said, cold and final. I have a defendant. And I am going to make sure the jury knows exactly what kind of man you are. Damon sank to his knees. He started to cry. Not for Leo, for himself, for the life he was losing. I turned away from him. He disgusted me. I looked at Brittany. She was still clutching the Hermes bag as if it could save her. I walked over to her. I snatched the bag from her hands. She tried to hold on to it, but I ripped it away, breaking the strap. I turned it upside down. Lipstick, keys, and a wallet fell onto the floor. I threw the empty bag onto the table next to the medical report. Evidence, I said to the police officer. Then I looked at Brittany. Your carriage has turned back into a pumpkin Cinderella, and midnight just struck. The sound of my hand striking my son's face still echoed in the corners of the room, a ghost of violence that hung heavy in the air. Damon was on his knees, weeping into his hands, broken by the weight of his own cowardice. But Brittany was not broken. Not yet. She was a creature of pure survival instinct, and like a cornered rat, she was ready to bite. She scrambled back from the piano, her eyes wild, darting between the police officers and me. She looked at the ruined cake, she looked at the screen with the frozen image of her abuse, and she realized she had lost the moral high ground. She had lost the social battle. She had lost her reputation. But she still thought she had the castle. Get out, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the door. Her voice shredded the silence, shrill and desperate. Get out of my house, Winston. I want you gone. I want all of you gone. She turned to the lead police officer, a tall woman with a face like granite. Officer, remove this man, she demanded, trying to summon the authority she usually wielded over waiters and valets. He is trespassing. He assaulted my husband. This is my property. My name is on the deed. I have rights. I want him arrested for home invasion. The officer didn't move. She looked at me, then she looked at Brittany. There was no sympathy in her eyes, only the cold calculation of law enforcement assessing a volatile scene. Brittany took a step forward, emboldened by her own delusion. Did you hear me? She shrieked, stomping her foot like a petulant child. This is my house. I decorated it. I chose the paint. I chose the furniture. It belongs to me. And I am ordering you to remove this violent old man from my premises immediately. I watched her. I watched the way she clung to the idea of ownership like a drowning woman clinging to a piece of driftwood. It was pathetic. It was almost sad if she hadn't been a monster. I reached into the inner pocket of my tuxedo jacket. I bypassed the silk handkerchief. I bypassed the phone. My fingers closed around a single folded document. It wasn't white paper. It was a heavy red legal folder, the kind my lawyer Finch used for urgent business. I chuckled. It was a low, dry sound that rumbled in my chest like gravel in a mixer. Your house, I asked, my voice soft, but carrying a weight that made the room lean in. Yes, my house, Brittany hissed, her chest heaving. Damon and I are the owners. You might have helped with the down payment. Winston and I appreciate that, Charity, but the title is ours. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Charity, I repeated. You call a $500,000 down payment charity. I walked toward her. The tap of my cane on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. You are right about one thing, Brittany, I said, stopping 5 feet from her. You did choose the paint. You chose that awful beige in the hallway. You chose the overpriced chandelier above your head. I opened the red folder. But you didn't read the fine print. I pulled out the document. It was a deed. A property deed stamped with the official seal of the Fulton County Clerk's office. Damon, I said without looking at my son, who was still sniffling on the floor. Do you remember the day we signed the closing papers? Do you remember the name of the company that bought this property? Damon looked up, his eyes red and swollen. He looked confused. It was us, he stammered. Carter Family Trust. No, I said, shaking my head. It was WRC Holdings, LLC. I held up the paper for Brittany to see. Winston Ray Carter Holdings, I translated. That is my company, my shell corporation. I use it to hold real estate assets to protect them from liability. Brittany stared at the paper. Her eyes scanned the text, but her brain refused to accept it. What does that mean, she whispered. It means I bought the house, I said. Not you, not Damon. Me. My company holds the title. My company pays the property taxes. My company carries the insurance. But we signed a mortgage, she argued, desperate now. We make payments. You signed a lease, I corrected her. A lease agreement disguised as a mortgage payment to help you build credit. You pay rent, Brittany. You pay rent to me. And do you remember the amount? I looked at Damon. How much is the rent, Damon? Damon buried his face in his hands. $1, he whispered. $1 a year, I boomed, turning to the crowd. I let them live in a $1 million home in a gated community for $1 a year. I paid the maintenance. I paid the repairs. I paid for the roof when it leaked. All I asked for was that they maintain the property and care for the family. Brittany's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. She knew what was coming. She knew how contracts worked. So you are the landlord, she spat, trying to regain some footing. So what? You have to give us notice. You have to give us 30 days. You can't just kick a family out on the street. I have tenant rights. I know the law. Georgia law protects tenants. You have to go through eviction court. It takes months. I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who has already locked the gate. Usually you would be right, I said, if you were a normal tenant, if this was a normal lease. I flipped to page 12 of the document. The page was bookmarked with a red sticky note. But this isn't a standard lease, Brittany. Finch drafted this. And Finch doesn't write standard leases. I pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. Clause 14, Section B, I read aloud, the moral conduct and safekeeping clause. I looked at her over the rim of my reading glasses. It states that the tenancy is conditional upon the occupants maintaining a safe and habitable environment for all family members residing within. It specifically states that any act of gross negligence, abuse, or endangerment of a minor or disabled dependent constitutes an immediate and irrevocable breach of contract. I snapped the folder shut. The sound was like a gunshot. Immediate, I repeated. I looked at the garage door. You put a disabled minor in a garage with toxic mold, I said. You denied him food. You denied him medical care. You sold his medical equipment. I turned back to her. You didn't just break the lease, Brittany. You shattered it. You took a sledgehammer to it. But, she stammered, backing away until she hit the wall. You can't prove it is unsafe. I pointed to the police officer. I think the report she is filing right now proves it, I said. I think the video of my grandson eating off the floor proves it. I think the mold report proves it. I walked up to her. I was close enough to smell the fear on her, close enough to see the sweat beading on her forehead beneath the layers of expensive foundation. You are not the homeowner, I said, my voice low and cold. You are not the lady of the manor. You are a squatter. You are a bad guest who trashed the hotel room. I looked at my watch. It was a Patek Philippe, expensive, precise. It is 4:15, I said. I looked at the front door. I am terminating your lease effective immediately for cause. Brittany looked around the room. The guests were gone. The sponsors were gone. Only the police and my crew remained. She looked at Damon, but he was useless to her now. You can't do this, she screamed. My kids, Kyle and Kaylee, where will they sleep? They can go to their father, I said. Your ex-husband. I already called him. He is on his way. He seems very interested in the video footage of you neglecting your stepson. I imagine your custody arrangement is about to change very significantly. No, she wailed, sliding down the wall. No, you can't take my babies. I am not taking them, I said. You lost them. You lost them the minute you decided that Instagram likes were more important than their brother's life. I turned to the lead officer. Captain, I said, as the legal owner of this property, I am formally requesting that you remove these trespassers. The officer nodded. She stepped forward, pulling a pair of handcuffs from her belt. Brittany Carter, she said, you are under arrest for child endangerment and fraud. But before we take you to the station, you have a choice. The officer looked at me. Mr. Carter has generously given you a grace period. I held up one finger. 1 hour, I said. You have 1 hour to pack your bags. Not the furniture, not the TV, not the silver, just your clothes and your personal items. Anything bought with money from Leo's trust stays here. That Hermes bag stays. The shoes stay. Brittany looked at the bag on the table. She looked at her shoes. I am naked, she whispered. Everything I own, I bought it with the account. Then you leave naked, I said, cold as ice. Or you leave in that jumpsuit they give you at the county jail. It is your choice. I turned to Damon. He was standing up now, swaying slightly. He looked at me with eyes full of tears. Dad, he rasped. What about me? I didn't sign the checks. I didn't sell the battery. No, I said. You just watched. I pointed to the door. You have an hour too, Damon. Dad, please, he begged, stepping toward me. I have nowhere to go. I don't have any money. She spent it all. You have a truck, I said. You have a job. You are a grown man. Figure it out. But Leo, he cried. Let me say goodbye to Leo. He is my son. I laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. He is not your son, I said. He is Sarah's son. And as of this morning, I filed for emergency custody. Finch is with the judge right now showing him the mold report. You lost him, Damon. You lost the privilege of being a father when you let him sleep in the cold. I turned my back on them. Start packing, I said. Brittany screamed, a primal sound of rage and loss. She lunged for me, her nails hooked into claws. I will kill you, she shrieked. You ruined my life. The officer tackled her before she got within 3 feet of me. They went down in a heap of pink silk and police Kevlar. The handcuffs clicked shut. I didn't even flinch. I just smoothed my tuxedo jacket. I walked over to the table where the Hermes bag sat. I picked it up. It was heavy, beautiful leather, stolen dignity. I looked at the garage door. Leo was waiting. I had a house to clean, and for the first time in years, the air in this place was starting to feel fresh. 60 minutes, I said to the room at large. The clock starts now. The sirens did not sound like an emergency anymore. They sounded like a gavel banging against a sounding block. Blue and red lights washed over the living room walls, mixing with the pastel pink of the birthday balloons, creating a surreal disco effect. The party was over, but the house was fuller than it had been all day. 2 uniformed officers stood by the front door blocking the exit. But the people who scared Brittany the most were not the ones with guns. They were the ones with clipboards. 2 women in navy blue windbreakers walked in. On the back of their jackets in bold white letters were the initials CPS. Child Protective Services. I had called Finch immediately after finding the mold. Finch had called the Fulton County District Attorney, and the District Attorney had called CPS. When you present a mountain of evidence, including video of physical abuse and medical reports of poisoning, the system moves fast. One of the caseworkers, a woman named Mrs. Alvarez, walked straight to me. She didn't look at the crystal chandelier or the ruined cake. She looked at the red folder in my hand. Is this the documentation, Mr. Carter? She asked. I handed it to her. Everything is in there, I said. The trust fund withdrawal records showing the embezzlement, the medical report regarding the black mold exposure, the timeline of the starvation, and the flash drive with the video evidence. Mrs. Alvarez nodded. She looked at Brittany, who was currently pinned against the wall by the female police officer, her hands cuffed behind her back. Brittany saw the CPS jackets. Her eyes widened. The realization hit her harder than the handcuffs. This wasn't just about jail. This was about her image. This was about her identity as a mother. "You can't be here," she screamed, struggling against the officer. "You can't take my children. I am a good mother. I am the influencer of the year. Look at the balloons. Look at the party. I threw a party for my daughter." Mrs. Alvarez walked over to her. She looked at Brittany with eyes that had seen too many horrors to be impressed by a pink dress. "Mrs. Carter," she said calmly, "we have an emergency removal order signed by Judge Hatcher. Based on the evidence of severe neglect and endangerment regarding the minor Leo Carter and the financial exploitation of a dependent, we are placing all minors in the home into protective custody immediately." "All of them," Brittany shrieked. "But Kyle and Kaylee are fine. They have bedrooms. They eat pancakes. They are happy." Mrs. Alvarez shook her head. "A home where one child is tortured is not safe for any child," she said. "Abuse is not a room, Mrs. Carter. It is an atmosphere." She turned to the second caseworker. "Get the children," she said. "No," Brittany wailed. "Not my babies. Don't touch them." I watched as the second caseworker went into the living room where Kyle and Kaylee were huddled together on the sofa. They were terrified. They had watched their mother scream. They had watched their grandfather slap their stepfather. They had watched the police put metal cuffs on their mother's wrists. Kyle was crying, holding his sister's hand. Kaylee was clutching a Barbie doll, staring at the police lights with wide, traumatized eyes. I felt a pang of guilt in my chest. These kids were innocent. They were spoiled, yes. They were entitled, yes. But that was not their fault. They were victims of Brittany's warping influence just as much as Leo was a victim of her neglect. She had taught them that love was conditional on likes. She had taught them that cruelty was acceptable if it was directed at the weak. The caseworker knelt down in front of them. She spoke softly. She offered her hand. "Come on, guys," she said. "We are going to go for a ride." "Where is Mommy?" Kaylee sobbed. "Mommy has to talk to the police," the caseworker said. "But your daddy is coming to get you." Daddy. Their biological father. Brittany's first husband. A man named Mark who ran a landscaping business in Savannah. A decent man who had been pushed out of their lives by Brittany's lawyers and her lies. I had called Mark 3 hours ago. I told him everything. He was already on the highway. Brittany heard the word daddy. "You called Mark," she screamed at me, spitting in my direction. "You called that loser. He is behind on child support. He drives a truck. He can't take care of them. He drives a truck," I said, stepping into her line of sight. "So do I, Brittany. And unlike you, he didn't sell his son's wheelchair to buy concert tickets." The police officer grabbed Brittany's arm. "Time to go, Mrs. Carter," she said. "Wait," Brittany pleaded, her heels skidding on the hardwood floor as they dragged her toward the door. "My bag. I need my bag." "Your bag is evidence," I said, picking up the Hermes Birkin from the table, the one paid for with Leo's surgery money. "It stays here." She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "I hope you rot," she hissed. "I hope you die alone in this big empty house." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had terrorized my family. "I won't be alone," I said. "I have my grandson, and I have my conscience. That is more than you will have in a cell." The officers marched her out. The scene on the front lawn was a spectacle. The neighbors, the ones she had lied to, the ones she had tried to impress, were standing on their porches. They held their phones up. They were recording. Brittany Carter, the woman who lived for the camera, was finally getting the coverage she deserved. I walked to the window and watched. They shoved her into the back of the patrol car. She had to duck her head awkwardly because of the handcuffs. Her pink dress was bunched up around her knees. Her hair was a mess. The fantasy was over. Then I saw a beat-up Ford F-150 pull into the driveway, screeching to a halt behind the police cruisers. A man jumped out. He was wearing work boots and a t-shirt covered in grass stains. Mark. He ran toward the house, ignoring the police, ignoring the neighbors. He ran straight for the porch where the CPS worker was leading Kyle and Kaylee out. Daddy, Kaylee screamed, breaking away from the caseworker. She ran into his arms. Mark caught her, lifting her up, burying his face in her neck. Kyle ran to him, hugging his legs, sobbing. Mark looked up at the house. He saw me standing in the window. He nodded, a single sharp nod of gratitude. I nodded back. He put his kids in his truck. He buckled them in. He didn't look at the police car where his ex-wife was screaming behind the glass. He just drove away, taking the innocent casualties of this war to safety. The house was quiet now. The police officer turned to me. "We need to process the scene, Mr. Carter," she said. "We need to photograph the garage. We need to take the bedding into evidence." "Do whatever you need to do," I said. "What about the boy?" she asked. "Leo. CPS needs to place him." I pulled another document from my pocket. It was the emergency custody order Finch had faxed over 10 minutes ago, signed by the judge. "I am the placement," I said. "He comes with me." The officer checked the paper. She nodded. "All right, but he needs to be checked by a hospital immediately. The mold exposure—" "We are going straight to Emory University Hospital," I said. "My specialist is waiting." I turned away from the door. I walked back through the wreckage of the party. I walked past Damon, who was sitting on the stairs, his head in his hands. He didn't look up as I passed. He was a man without a country. His wife was in jail, his stepkids were gone, his son was leaving, and his father had just fired him as a son. I walked into the garage. The air was still cold, but it felt different now. The heavy blanket of fear had lifted. Leo was sitting on the mattress. He had taken off the headphones. He was looking at the door, waiting. When he saw me, he smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was real. "Is she gone, Grandpa?" he asked. "Yes, son," I said, kneeling down. "She is gone." "Is she coming back?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No," I said. "Not for a long time. And even if she does, she will never come near you again." The judge made sure of that. I reached out and picked him up. He was light, too light. I could feel his ribs through the sweatshirt, but he felt solid in my arms. He put his head on my shoulder. "Where are we going?" he asked. "We are going to a hotel," I said. "A real hotel, with room service, and a big bathtub, and a bed with sheets made of Egyptian cotton. And tomorrow we are going home, to my house." Leo wrapped his arms around my neck. "Can I have a cheeseburger?" he whispered. I laughed, a sound that cracked the tension in my chest. "You can have 10 cheeseburgers," I said. "You can have the whole cow." I carried him out of the garage. I carried him through the kitchen, past the ruined cake, past the shattered vase. I carried him past Damon, who finally looked up as we passed. Damon opened his mouth to speak. "Dad?" I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I walked right out the front door, carrying the only thing that mattered. The night air was cool, but the Maybach was waiting. The engine was running. The heat was on. I put Leo in the passenger seat. I buckled him in. I walked around to the driver's side. I looked back at the house one last time, the house I had bought, the house that had become a prison. Sell it, I thought. Burn it. I don't care. I got in the car. I looked at Leo. "Ready, Spy?" I asked. "Ready, Grandpa," he said. I put the car in gear. The V12 engine hummed. We drove away, leaving the sirens and the sadness in the rear-view mirror. The war was over. Now the healing could begin. The morning sun in Atlanta hits the terrace of my estate at exactly 7 o'clock. It filters through the old oak trees, dappling the stone floor with light and warmth. I sat there in my favorite wicker chair, a cup of black coffee steaming in my hand, listening to the sound of freedom. It wasn't the sound of birds chirping, although there were plenty of those. It was the rhythmic whoosh of rubber tires on pavement. I looked down the long, winding driveway. A blur of neon yellow and black carbon fiber shot past. It was Leo. He wasn't sitting in the heavy, rusted manual chair that had blistered his hands 6 months ago. He was strapped into a custom-built racing wheelchair, low to the ground, aerodynamic and built for speed. His arms, the arms that Brittany had called weak, were pumping the wheels with the piston-like precision of a professional athlete. His muscles rippled under his skin, which was now bronzed by the sun, not pale from a dungeon. He reached the end of the driveway, spun the chair around with a spray of gravel, and sprinted back toward the house. He was grinning, a wide, open-mouthed grin that showed all his teeth. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted better than it had in years. 6 months. That is all it took to undo the damage, well, the physical damage at least. The emotional scars were deeper, but we were working on those. We had a good therapist, a woman who didn't use essential oils or lock boys in garages. She listened. And slowly, week by week, Leo was learning that he didn't have to apologize for existing. He rolled up the ramp to the terrace. I had installed it the week we moved in. It wasn't a clunky metal thing bolted over the stairs. It was a seamless integration of stone and landscape architecture. I spent $50,000 on hardscaping just so my grandson could enter his own home without asking for help. Some people buy pools for vanity. I buy concrete for dignity. Grandpa Leo panted, pulling his gloves off. Did you see my time? 3 minutes flat. I smiled, putting my cup down. I saw it, son, I said. You are getting faster. The track team isn't going to know what hit them. Leo beamed. He grabbed his water bottle, a specialized bottle that attached to his frame. He drank deeply. I looked at him. He had gained 15 pounds, muscle and healthy fat. His cheeks were full. His eyes were bright. The dark circles were gone, replaced by the glow of a boy who sleeps in a bed made of memory foam and Egyptian cotton. His room, the fourth room in this house. I didn't turn it into a craft room. I turned it into a command center. I knocked down 2 walls to make it massive. I installed a ceiling track lift system that allowed him to glide from his bed to his ensuite bathroom with the touch of a button. I put in a voice-activated environmental control system so he could change the temperature, the lights, and the blinds without asking anyone. And the bed. It wasn't a mattress on concrete. It was a therapeutic adjustable bed that looked like a spaceship. I stood up. My knees popped a little. I was getting older, but I felt younger than I had in a decade. Ready for the pool, I asked. Leo nodded. Let's do it. We went inside. We took the elevator down to the lower level. I had installed a commercial-grade elevator, not those scary little residential lifts. This one could fit a piano. The lower level used to be a wine cellar and a storage room. Now it was a rehabilitation center. And there it was. The pool. Not a kidney bean-shaped hole in the ground for tanning. This was a heated saltwater lap pool with 0 entry access and underwater treadmills. Leo rolled to the edge. And then he did something that still made my throat tight every time I saw it. He unbuckled his strap. He put his hands on the rails, and he stood up. It was shaky. His legs trembled, but he stood. The surgery. The tendon release surgery that Brittany had stolen from him. We got it done 3 weeks after I took him from that house. The surgeon said it was a miracle his joints hadn't fused completely from the neglect. But Leo was a fighter. He stood there holding his own weight for 10 seconds, then 20. Look, Grandpa, he grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. No hands. He let go of the rail. He wobbled, but he stayed upright for 3 glorious seconds before grabbing the bar again. I clapped. I clapped until my hands stung. Incredible, I said. You are a giant, Leo. He lowered himself into the warm water. He began his exercises, moving his legs against the resistance of the water. I sat on the bench watching him. I thought about the other house, the house of lies. I had sold it last month. I sold it to a nice young couple with a baby on the way. I sold it for under market value just to get rid of it. But before I handed over the keys, I hired a crew to strip that garage down to the studs and rebuild it properly. I wasn't going to pass on the poison. And Brittany. She was currently residing in a state facility awaiting trial. Her lawyer was trying to plead insanity, but the video evidence was too damning. The influencer of the year was now inmate number 492. Her Instagram account had been deleted, but the screenshots of her cruelty would live on the internet forever. And Damon. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Damon. It was the 3rd time he had called this week. He was living in a studio apartment downtown, working at a warehouse. He had lost his truck. He had lost his friends. He wanted to see Leo. He wanted to explain. I let it ring. I didn't block him. I wanted him to know the line was open and that I was choosing not to answer. Silence is a powerful teacher. Maybe in a year, maybe in 2, when he had truly proven he was a man, I would pick up. But not today. Today was for the boy in the pool. Leo finished his lap. He swam over to the edge. Grandpa, he asked, wiping water from his eyes. Yes, bye. Are we happy? He asked. It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of the world. I looked around the room. I looked at the sunlight dancing on the water. I looked at the high-tech gym. I looked at the elevator. But mostly I looked at him. I looked at the boy who had been thrown away like trash and who was now shining like gold. I thought about the empty bedrooms in my old life. I thought about the silence I used to live in before he came here. Yes, son, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We are happy because we are home. And this time nobody is ever going to turn off the heat. A house built on the suffering of the innocent is not a home, it is a tomb waiting to collapse. We often mistake silence for peace and compliance for happiness, especially when looking at those who cannot easily speak for themselves. My daughter-in-law thought a coat of paint and a locked door could hide the truth, but she forgot that rot always eats from the inside out. True wealth isn't the bedrooms you count, but the dignity you afford to the most vulnerable among you. Protect your pack or prepare to be hunted by the wolf you invited in. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring more stories of justice to light. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to step in to save a family member when everyone else looked away? I read every single one of your stories. Until next time, stay vigilant and keep your circles safe.